And we are live. I am Adam. This is Highly Articulated, and today I have the pleasure of having a return guest, a repeat offender, if you will, a very good friend of mine who I've had on before, and I love having on and talking about Joe's. But since the last time he was on, he has become part of G.I. Joe canon. And so I had to reach out and get him back on here. We had planned to come, do another video soon, but not this soon. But anyway, without further ado, my good friend Christopher M.A.C.L.O.E.D. What is going on?
What's up, man? I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm great. Just having a lazy Sunday. It's hot.
Lazy Sunday.
Summertime.
Wake up at the late afternoon. Yeah, sorry, that's a tune.
I have young children, so it's been a long time since I woke up in the afternoon. Very long time.
I don't have children, but yeah, same.
It's funny how, in my 20s, that was like a good weekend, right? If I didn't get up till like the PM, I was like, man, this is a great weekend. I'm having a good time. Now I'm up at 6 a.m. and I'm sort of like, do I get out of bed right away or do I check the weather first? 4 a.m. That's why you do videos so early. You've already had your lunch by the time you do a video.
That's it. Yeah. Like, see, I've got into this weird habit of getting up super early, and that's it. I'm awake then, and it's like, okay. So I feel like it's when you get older, you start to go to bed earlier and get up earlier. It's really funny. Like, again, I think I've been thrown off by years and years of traveling and just never really having gotten over jet lag at any point. And I've just it's just this weird little spot. That's the thing. Like, loads of news breaks in the evening, so around about like 9 to midnight. Loads of news breaks, and I'm always missing it. And in the morning, I'm like, oh, God damn it.
But you're the first one going live to report on it in the morning. So that's
true. That's 4 a.m.
At 4 a.m. You're on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast. You have no idea. Like, it feels like every morning I wake up and I get, in social media, I get my notifications that you've done a news burst, and I'm like, what is going on?
When did that happen? Yeah,
it's like 6 in the morning. What time?
This week was definitely more chill because I had loads of work to do. There wasn't a great deal of Joe news, and with the weekly, with the mixture of like having so much to do and of course, not having that much news to talk about, we decided to kind of postpone it for this week. But yeah, it's been we went from like literally 2 a days, 2 live things a day, sometimes even more if I did.
I was going to say at least 2,
yeah. And then, it's kind of really kind of chilled out a little bit. But we know there's going to be it's peaks and troughs. And then all of a sudden there's going to be a load of new pre-orders and PulseCon's around the corner. And it's going to be ridiculous again.
I was going to say, excuse me. Yo-Joe June was crazy for reveals, for pre-orders. July was no better. I think everybody thought like, oh, it's July. Yo-Joe June is over. Like San Diego Comic-Con, we'll get Chuckles and that'll be it. Gotcha, said Hasbro.
Here's all the things we've ever made. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, oh, by the way, we just didn't have enough days in June. So here you go. But July was crazy. We're now in August. We're kind of midway through August. And I think it's, I don't want to jinx it, but I think it's safe to say that like August may be a little bit of a downtime before we get into September and PulseCon starts ramping up and we get right back into it. But
you do realize that PulseCon's going to be not just that 3-pack, but there's going to be new figures to show off, new pre-orders. There's going to be that whole 5-figure wave of Helix, Hawk, Ripper, Buzzer. Shockwave, they're going to be up. Probably I don't know if the Vamp might be available or up.
And that's all
that
the stuff
point.
we know about.
Yeah, that's true. That's
like
true.
they keep hitting us with stuff where we're like, oh, I thought that was 2024. Like I thought that was later. You know, like I feel like we're you know, things that you and I are expecting later just keeps coming up. It just keeps popping up. We're like, oh, it's okay. It's a little sooner than expected, but
fair enough. That's now. Okay.
Fine. Yeah. Oh, mid 2024 launching, you know, releasing now. It'll be available in October. You're like, okay, that's not 2024, but that's fine.
There's so much coming as well. That's the other thing. It's not even just the stuff we know about, like officially know about around the fandom and everything, but there's and we haven't had. I imagine there's going to be some sort of leak scenario soon at some point. That usually happens. Like a new list of stuff. Maybe some of that stuff that came out a while back, he'll get a bit more filled in with like the Hanna-Barbera names and everything, but we'll see, I guess. But yeah, I think, you know what? I completely forgot about a lot of them.
I did too. I
think it's because they're not necessarily connected to anything yet, even though they probably are now. Like, even we've had a lot of reveals recently, a lot of kind of name only, not a lot of name only, but some name only, some leaked kind of listings. I imagine there's a lot of marrying up to some of the stuff we've seen going into that. Yeah, so I don't know. It's just nuts, man. It's non-stop now.
And it's almost
I'll take a week. I'll take a week of downtime. Honestly, just give me a break.
That was me a couple weeks back. I was like, I'll just not do a video this weekend. And I was like, there's so many videos to watch. I think I even jumped on one or two other people's videos because there's just so much going on anyway.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna record one. But it's
a good way around it.
So
it's a good way around it.
Anyway, we do these videos to have fun and to interact and to chat with people. We don't have a topic today. I just wanted to chat with you, and we're going to get a little bit of backstory about wee little lad Chris getting into G.I. Joe. But before that, I'm just going to check in with the comments here. Jeremy was the first to comment. What's going on, Jeremy? Payne's Toy Samples is here. Beta Ray Bob, Larry Reed. Shout out to Larry again for getting me that TFCon t-shirt. That thing is awesome. My kids love it. And I love it. My wife was like, why do you get Transformers t-shirts now? You don't even like Transformers. I was like, it's a cool shirt. What can I say? Luc Poulet is here. Radical Toys is here, and so on and so forth. That's everybody that's commented to say hello, but I'm sure there's others watching as well. Hello to everybody. Welcome. If you guys have any questions for Chris, feel free to ask them in the comments. I will kind of save them to the end. I've got a few questions that we're gonna go through. And look at him! A little mini G.I. Joe man.
And just to prove that we were Chicago Bears fans at that point as well. It's my dad, my nan, and my granddad right there. There you go.
So that's not related to anything, but why not? Let's kick it off with that. Chicago Bears fans, I know that you played basketball, so I assume you were you're probably a Bulls fan.
I was a Bulls fan.
Age.
Yeah, I mean, 100%.
When you're in a country where you can pick any team because you're not close to any of them, you pick Michael Jordan's team. Obviously.
Thing was, I was in a country where it just wasn't, known about. I only knew really about. Well, I knew about basketball, but in terms of the NBA and all that kind of stuff, it really wasn't widespread when I was that young. So it was all connected to that early 1989 trip to the US when I was a little kid, when I got loads of Joes and all that kind of stuff. In that same trip, we obviously were exposed to the TV and everything while we were out there, and I was just obsessed with American TV, kids TV, sports, all that kind of stuff. So it was around about, I want to say 92, that I got really into it and wanted it to kind of like that was going to be my focus for for a while. And yeah, I ended up playing for the school, for the college, for the county, for multiple teams in the area, and then and then eventually got into kind of like a semi-professional capacity where I was training, doing kind of coaching around the kind of area, because it was still, I mean, I was probably in my 20s at that point. Mid to late 20s, 23, 24, about that, early 20s. And so I was doing coaching around like the little schools and stuff. So we get paid for that. We get paid for training. We get paid for games. It wasn't a huge amount. Like I had to have another job as well, but it was definitely interesting and fun. And then we were on TV once, which was really weird. I don't know what even I couldn't even find it. I still to this day haven't found that televised game.
Yeah.
But it was like a National League game, and it was I can't even remember who we played against. I want to say maybe Manchester, because there was we might have been playing Manchester. It was away as well, and so they had the kind of setup and the ability to do that. But we had it was random and weird, but it took a while to get to that point. But from a kid, it was balls, man, and it was just playing every single day for like 9 hours a day. And I loved it. It was amazing.
Backtracking a little bit.
Yeah.
Backtracking from basketball Chris back to G.I. Joe Chris.
Yes.
Now you grew up in the eastern shores of England.
Absolutely.
M.A.C.L.E.O.D, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. That was actually, I think that picture that I just showed you was on M.A.C.L.E. Beach, I think.
It was M.A.C.L.E.O.D.
Yeah.
Now I only know that because I've known you for years now, and just I don't know why I remember M.A.C.L.E.O.D, but it's there in my head, so it's there. Which is like I said, the east of England, the coast of England.
Tiny little village on the coast of the East Anglia in Norfolk.
So how in the world do you get exposed to G.I. Joe?
Dude, it was global and it was everywhere. And it was so my experience as a kid was kind of Action Man first. So I remember getting I had an Action Man figure that was directly mine, I believe. It was the one with the all black parachute gear on it, like the parachute, kind of like Sparrowhawk, but in the 12-inch version. So basically all the kind of the gear, the helmet with the green visor.
Yeah,
it was phenomenal. That working parachute, cloth onesie, the all-in-one kind of black gear, and it was just the web gear. It was so cool. And then I had a few hand-me-down kind of bits and pieces from. I think like neighbors and that just appeared in in your possession. You have no idea how they got there.
100%. I can relate to that.
There was like green web gear similar to the black stuff that you like. It was almost like the set, like a separate like camouflage jacket with the button up and everything. But it was a weird camo. It was almost like for the time a modern camo. Green with like almost like black dots and stuff on it. It was really interesting, but it was I want to say it looked very much like an Eastern European at the time camouflage.
Sure, yeah.
So I had that and like the green web gear and loads of like bits and pieces like that. But Action Man was my first kind of introduction into that. My dad was in the Royal Air Force, so he was an electrical engineer, and so he kind of exposed me to the military, and I was always really interested in what he
did.
And we did a lot of things together where he would buy Combat and Survival, which was this amazing military kind of like monthly magazine that you'd get that would go into a folder, one of those kind of like Marshall Cavendish situations where you get like the first one comes with a binder and then the rest of them
you kind of fill out the collection.
Exactly. Well, we got an NFL one of those, by the way, when we came back from the US, and that's where I learned all of my teams and all that kind of stuff for the NFL. And we ended up following the Bears because they just won the Super Bowl against the Patriots. So there was that was one of the reasons we were Bears fans, really, because it was like easier merch to get hold of as well. Do you know what I mean? Because like they're the champions, whatever.
Right. That's the team that's on every shelf in every country of the world.
I weirdly got obsessed with Walter Payton, And
Mhm.
because my dad got me a little jersey, a little Walter Payton jersey. It was tiny, and they put like padding, like foam padding they cut out, and for like, you know, for the padding and stuff.
Yeah.
And so like I'd be running around with my little helmet on
Yeah.
and my little again, like an absolute buffoon. But yeah, so I kind of that was, yeah. So anyway, coming back to that, so my experience of that was Action Man. Dad was in the military. Combat and Survival was really cool as well, like reading that every day and like learning all these different things about the military and, you know, all sorts of stuff like that.
Mhm.
And also they did a weapons and ammo one, right? Which I don't know if it was called that, but it was by the same, people might know if they see this in the UK, but it was like similar kind of situation, but it was all about like, you know, guns.
Mhm.
And like I'm very, you know, when it comes to kind of the political landscape, I'm very left. So it's not that I, you know, I know the damage and the horror that they bring, but I was always
Mhm.
really interested in it. I was always really like, you know, interested
I'm
in
the same
knowing
way.
about it.
Yeah.
And that was the kind of thing with GI Joe. It was like a safe environment to kind of like experience all that kind of stuff, you know,
Mhm.
and dad being in the forces and never really having to, you know, obviously he did a lot and he went all over the world, but he was never really in like any serious conflict. So, you know, there wasn't that kind of fear necessarily. And I was too young to really know what was going on at the time. One thing I do remember, I had pneumonia when I was about 7 years old, and I was in hospital. Dad was on exercise at the time, so he had to like come back to the hospital, but he was in the middle of exercise, so he had all his like gear, like his beret, his disrupted pattern like uniform and everything. So he
Mhm.
comes back in, and I remember him coming in, you know, being in the doorway with all his gear on, like just looking like an absolute soldier hero type thing. And I just remember that vividly. And yeah, that was one of those things that you kind of like, kind of stick with you a little bit, like. And so anyway,
Mhm.
GI Joe, like you kind of would expect Action Force would be my first introduction to it, but it really
Yeah.
wasn't. Like Action Force was like Palatoy was like 82 to 85, and I was really like, I'd have been like, you know, 4 or 5 years old at that point when Palatoy went bust. And I'd kind of been exposed to it, but I don't really remember it very
Mhm.
clearly. I know the next door neighbor again, Joe and Gwen. Shout out to Joe Eakins. Now, Joe Eakins, here's a story for you. Joe Eakins, our neighbor, we went years and years not knowing that he was a military hero, like a World War II tank gunner that landed D-Day, that fought in Villers-Bocage.
Mhm.
It's a
Okay.
really famous tank battle, right? There was a really famous tank driver in the German team called Michael Wittmann, and he was this guy that had been for years. He was a tank ace, and he killed loads and loads of you know, taking loads of tanks out basically.
He was the Red Baron of tanks.
He was, and that you
Yeah.
joke about, or you know, you say it with tongue in cheek there, but he's actually been described as that. Like this
Well,
guy was
no, I wasn't saying it tongue. I was
no,
like
but you
as
know
an
what I mean. Like
example. Like
you
that's
say it
yeah.
in like, but you know, like it wasn't like you didn't know that
No,
necessarily,
I didn't know. Yeah,
right?
sure.
But that
Yeah.
is what he's been described as, and there have been like documentaries on this particular
Mhm.
battle. Now, Joe was fresh, like he just literally like he hadn't fired a shot in anger at this point. They get to Villa Bocage, and it was a situation where they were in the tree line, the three tanks that they were, you know, operating in their squadron. I don't know what you call it now, tank regiment. And then there was a huge field, and then there was a brick wall and some housing and stuff on the other side. So in between, I think there were Canadian forces on one side, the British in the tree line on the other, and the Germans were crossing the this big field in between. Wittmann's tank was one of those tanks. Now there were three crossing the thing. The tank commander drove into, like, you know, ordered them to drive out of the tree line to engage. They fired, like Joe was like, okay, fire, takes out the first tank. They retreat into the tree line.
Mhm.
They get return fire. The tank commander gets injured, so he's taken out of the situation. He's like getting treatment, I think, out of the tank at the time in the trees, and that leaves Joe effectively kind of on his own, really. Obviously, someone else is driving it as well, but he's not being given the information. So he had
Mhm.
to then, like, you know, they come back out, takes the next tank out, which I think was Whitman's at that point, right? Wittmann, sorry. So it takes out, and there's a really famous image of, they think it's Wittmann's tank, but it might not be. There's a bit of kind of conjecture over whether this one was the tank that was the one, where the basically it took the turret, it blew the turret off. So it took the tank out, the turret goes flying up in the air and lands upside down. And there's a really famous black and white picture of that turret on the ground next to the tank that it's, you know, that it belonged to. And then obviously they go back in, and they've had, you know, return fire, comes back out of the tree line for a third time and takes the third tank out. So in the first 3 shots he ever fired in battle, took out 3 tanks in a row, and obviously killed Michael Wittmann, who was this tank ace who was causing all sorts of issues. He'd been in, like, I want to say he'd been in Africa, in combat in Africa, and was like just taking tanks out for fun. Because the famous thing was that the Brits and the Americans and the Canadians, all of interestingly, I didn't even realize they'd said it, but yeah, there was a Canadian force there too. Just as we're talking about this, they didn't like have very good tanks. So especially against the Tigers, which is what Wittmann kind of commanded, and the Tigers were just clearing, you know, they were just taking the piss, basically. They were destroying everything. And like I said, he just comes up and goes bing, 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 takes them all out, and is this hero. And he never told us this, because one, Joe was very, he's passed away now, unfortunately. Really sad. Like, he was, you know, he was a hero of mine when I found out about this, obviously. But he was a lovely guy and a great neighbor. Joe and Gwen are wonderful people. And Joe Eakins is his name. If anyone ever wants to look him up, or you know, don't believe what I'm saying, just check out Joe, Ekins. Just type in World War II and you'll probably get all the information on him. But yeah, it was crazy. So he never told us about this. And one day, he had a book. He was looking through some sort of like military, you know, one of those big ones from the library or something. And he came across Joe's picture, or like, what he didn't realize it was the Joe next door, Joe Eakins, yada, 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 in this book. And he went out, like, you know, and it was one of those things back in the day where we had a little fence separating our 2 gardens. So you'd literally talk to each other over the fence. It was like waist high. We didn't, like, we were, you know, there was that thing of like community back then that you don't really see much anymore. And I'm the same. Like, I want like 10-foot high fences. I don't want to talk to anyone. I want a bit of privacy. But they had this, so we had this fence between guys. So we'd talk all the time, and they were so lovely, and, you know, always very generous too. And Dad was talking to him one day, and he said, "Look, Joe, is this you in this book?" And he was like, "Yeah, I don't really like talking about it." And he's like, "Oh, fair enough," kind of thing. So I won't bring it up. But he kept it to himself, because one, he didn't like the fact that you know, what he did was not something he felt was heroic. He thought it was, right, you know, like, you know, he didn't want to be known as that, and he didn't want that to be like, you know, the thing he was known for was killing people, which is fair enough. And I know that a lot of soldiers and a lot of people involved in all sorts of war, they go through all sorts of PTSD and stuff like that, and they deal with it in loads of different ways. And it was just insane. And like I said, there's been loads of documentaries about this as well, by the way. So if you check out Discovery Channel, there was one on BBC as well. He had a whole interview on the One Show towards the end of his life. It was crazy, and which is like a TV show in the UK. It's like a kind of like late afternoon, sorry, kind of after you get back from work, kind of like, I don't know, like just a talk show, but not a talk show. They have lots of like, I can't even describe it. It's hard to describe. Just, again, you can search for it, One Show. And he spoke to, I think it's, I forget the guy's name, but he's a really famous historian. He's done loads of TV. He's on radio. Dan something. Anyway, he interviewed him and Joe, and they're walking around this museum, and they're talking about this particular battle and everything. And I'm just sitting there watching it like, this is nuts. And around the same time, all these other documentaries came out about it. There was a battlefield, forensics episode about it, where they broke, because there was also planes coming in from above, attacking the tanks too. So there was a little bit of conjecture initially about who took the tanks out.
Yeah,
But
right.
but the general consensus now, as it's been worked out and discussed and everything, it's Joe's been given those particular accolades, as it were. But he passed away shortly after that. All of that kind of furore happened. We went to see him just before he passed away, actually, because we hadn't seen him for years. He moved away when we moved away as well, obviously, so we weren't neighbors anymore. But we went to see them both when they'd moved, and he was a little bit older and more frail at that point. I got a picture of the two of us, like hugging and everything. And he was really interesting, really cool. And like I said, we hardly ever talked about it. We only really talked about it. I only talked about it with him then, when I saw him then. And we went to a little pub nearby to have some dinner, some lunch when we went to see him. And there was a whole, almost like a shrine to him in his local. It was surreal. So
now,
that was interesting.
But your dad was in the military. Did he know that Joe had been in the military?
I think he knew he'd been in the military. He just didn't know he was this World War II.
It was just kind of like maybe he was the same as your dad. Like maybe he didn't see combat.
Yeah.
Maybe it was like, he was on the base and he doesn't talk about it because it was uneventful.
Or maybe he did. Like, I don't know the details of what my dad knew at the time, but I don't think Joe talked about it at all. I'm not even sure if Dad knew he was in the military at that point. I'd have to ask Dad. But it was just so interesting. And these things, like, you live next door to people for years and you just don't know that kind of stuff. And he would go back to Belgium quite often, or that Villers-Bocage area, and he's treated like a hero. Like he's, they have like a parade and stuff when he comes back. It was honestly, because obviously he liberated that particular area. He's looked upon and still is looked upon with incredible respect and honor and all sorts. It was surreal to hear all this stuff though. But anyway, that happened. And he, the whole point of that, Joe Eakins, was that they gave me a bunch of Palitoy hand-me-down toys that they had for their like nieces and nephews and kids and everything when they were younger. And so I got this box and it had the Cosmic Cruiser in it. It had Baron Ironblood. It had Black Major, a couple of Red Shadows. It had I want to say a couple of the early 82 figures before they got before we got repaints of them in Z-Force and all that kind of stuff, right? So you would have like the Green Beret figure, which I think it's a Marine Commando. So there's a Marine Commando I had, and a bunch of other, Parachute Regiment figure. The SAS Eagle, I had Eagle as well. That was really cool. Although it wasn't known as Eagle, it was just SAS Commander, I think, at the time. So there was all this kind of cool stuff that I got. Oh, and the one of the boats, I think it was the diving platform. This was before Q-Force, and it was released as a vehicle before that, and then redone for Q-Force. But it was really neat, and that kind of was my in to Palitoy.
Right.
I didn't know anything about it, and I also, my other granddad. That Joe Eakins isn't my granddad. My granddad on my mom's side, Mr. William Pitt, he was an absolute genius when it came to making stuff, and he built me a little fort, like a little, like by hand. This thing is incredible, and it had a little drawer in the back that you'd slide open, and you could use the mini kind of like figurines, like the kind of metal ones, and you'd put them in it and stuff. It was amazing. And then when you were finished with it, you put them all in the storage area
back in the drawer.
It was incredible. And so he was always doing stuff like that. And so I had a lot of military toys as a kid. And then my proper introduction to G.I. Joe, as it is, was International Heroes in '87, and that's the rebrand of G.I. Joe basically for the UK, after Palitoy. So it was all Hasbro stuff, but redone. And that to me is that's my love. That's where my heart is. Like, Flint, J, Barbecue, Airtight, Bloomin', that era of figures in that 87 and onwards is just my absolute heart. Like, Action Force International Heroes is such a cool period of time. The figures were phenomenal. comic, the weekly, the monthly, the VHS cartoons, which were technically just redubbed solo episodes. But like that whole time period, as confusing as it was to follow the narrative, it was just like that is where I fell in love with it. And then going to the US, the funny story, here's another funny story. I was in the playground, but I was of age. I wasn't hanging around there at 20 years old. I was in the playground in junior school, or it would have been infant school. No, it would have been junior school. And my mate Ian McQuatty had just got back from Florida, where he'd been on, and I think I was going shortly afterwards. So he'd come back from his holiday, and he was like, full of all these stories about America's this crazy place, and oh my God, you're going to love it, yada yada yada. And he was, it was around the time, I think, of, there was all sorts of stuff going on, but it was around the time of like, I'm blanking, Calvin and Hobbes and stuff like that. That he would he brought back a book of the strips and everything, that I fell in love with that as well. But he had this T-shirt which was really, it had something like I don't give a shit on it or something. Like it was edgy. It was edgy as hell, right? And I remember all of us were like, you can't wear that. And he got told off. He got in trouble for wearing it because it was something, it was a swear word, but it wasn't that bad. But obviously at the time, it was like the worst thing you could have done. It was terrible. Anyway, he was telling us this story that, oh yeah, they call Action Force figures G.I. Joe out there. And we were like, don't be stupid. No, they don't. Didn't believe him, despite having VHS episodes that had G.I. Joe written on the side of the vehicle.
Right, yeah.
We had the proof there. We just didn't put two and two together. So we thought he was like spinning a yarn or whatever. And it turns out, no, that's exactly what he was doing. He was
So did you guys think that they had changed it? You know what I mean?
No, we just didn't think. We thought he was mistaken, and that
it was something else entirely.
It was something else. Yeah. But again, I think that was the initial response, and then once we kind of marinated on it, it started to make a lot of sense. And then obviously, you're watching the episode and you start seeing that G.I. Joe thing.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, of course you do. And it wasn't until I then went off and bought loads of figures and came back with loads of figures and card backs and file cards and all sorts of stuff to prove, to help Ian's story and that position. So shout out to Ian McQuatty.
Back up your friend.
Exactly. So yeah, and then obviously, I mean, seeing that for the first time was mental, and we weren't a rich family by any stretch of the imagination. We weren't. I wouldn't even say we were well off. But we weren't poor. But it was one of those things where, we had to be careful. It was touch and go sometimes. But my mum and dad they'd always spoil me, and I wouldn't argue with it. But when we went, the trip to the US was one of those things that we saved for, and we went out together. But they saved up money for me, and they gave me £100, which equated then to close to $200, the exchange rate. So I ended up with all this money, and I just spent it all on G.I. Joes. I remember I think I got a few starting lineup figures. I got a Terry Pendleton Atlanta Braves one because it was a random one that they only had in this store that I was really interested in and wanted it. So I got that. But then I also got just a shed load of G.I. Joe figures. And I have gone back and looked to see roughly what those figures would have been. I've gone into Yojo, looked at the year, and kind of gone, it would have been a lot of these. I'm not going to tell you all of them now, obviously, but I will. I remember Storm Shadow version 2 was one figure. The Tiger Force was a big thing. So it was Roadblock, Tripwire, Duke, and Dusty. I picked up while I was out there. I got the Iron Grenadier. I got DJ. I got there was just a bunch of that era of figures that I managed to get hold of. I got the Mud Fighter. With Dogfight. So there was that was kind of like just to give you an idea of what figures were out at the time. So I know version 2's Storm Shadow was 88, but he was still on pegs
I was gonna say
from the
that was
previous year.
back when you like it wasn't like they'd hit a peg, they'd be there once and then they were gone. That was when they were like, okay, we sold out of them. We need another case of these.
So I remember getting Blizzard from the UK. Mum and Dad got me that for Christmas of like '89, I want to say. Budo, I got in a Budo was a weird one. I got that figure from a store in Norwich, which was the city where I in Norfolk where I lived, and Gerald's, it was the place I think it was. And I remember going up the escalator, and there was this because they had a toy section at the top, but there was this random toy section just at the stage before you go up to the actual toy section on escalators.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I went out and I saw it, and I saw this figure, and it had G.I. Joe on it. There was no other stuff. It was an imported figure. It was found somehow, made its way out here, and I got the American version of that figure. Charbroil was another one I think I got in this country. Hardball. I might have got Charbroil, Hardbroil, Hit and Run. I might have got them as well. That in the US. Iron Grenadier, Lightfoot, Scoop was another one I got. Muskrat. Who else did they get? Shockwave. There were loads, man. Spearhead and Max I got in the US. Version 2 Storm Shadow. And then I want to say Voltar I got in the UK. And then obviously for actual 89 releases, 89 releases, sorry, it was Alley Viper. It was Annihilator, Backblast, Countdown, DJ, Deep Six. I'm not kidding. I got all of these. Downtown, no, didn't get Downtown. Couldn't find him. Frag Viper was the UK, so you can cut him out. Norgahide. When I saw Norgahide, I was like, because one, seeing like sub-team figures that you'd never seen with new, that was like such a weird thing to me. Like that was like interesting and fun. And then I'd see it with the Dreadnought logo. I'm like, there's another Dreadnought, and he's got a wild boar.
A warthog with him.
And it's got like a freaking, this is just the best. Heat Viper, Night Viper, Recoil, Rock and Roll version 2 blew my mind. Scoop, I said Scoop, didn't I? Funny story about Scoop. My auntie Di, we were around her house in Birmingham, and obviously I had that figure. I brought figures with me, so I'd play with them all the time. And her dog Snoopy, gorgeous, beautiful dog, kind of like this big, fluffy white and grey, gorgeous thing with the hair goes over its eyes. Beautiful, beautiful dog. She's a big thing. I loved Snoopy. I was really close with Snoopy. But he got hold of Scoop's helmet, Kitty said, chewed on it. Dad managed to get it out of his mouth, but obviously the microphone that had been swallowed, and it had this like marbling effect on the helmet where obviously he kind of bit down on it. But it was still salvageable, and I still have that helmet and that figure and everything. The figure was fine. Helmet saved his life. The microphone was in his poop at some point, and we weren't going to go digging for that.
No.
But I ended up sticking a bit of plastic from the weapons trees, or like from the vehicles, I think, actually, where you get like
you get the parts that you get to snap off.
Dad cut a bit off, and it was just thin enough to squeeze into that hole. So he had this like bit of grey plastic sticking out instead of the microphone. But I always kept that in there because I thought that was quite genius. Target, Snake Eyes version 3, and Tundra Stalker were the other ones I picked up that day. And obviously, like I said, Dogfight and the Mud Fighter. And that is effectively, I think, genuinely what I bought with the money. All those figures, the vehicle, the starting lineup figure. There was something else. There was a couple other things I had left, some money left over. But it was like supermarket sweep. And the wall of figures, and I have told the story way too many times, almost every episode I've ever done. But it was literally just like, yep. It was nuts. And I did the same thing again a couple of years later, or a year later, when it was like Ninja Force and stuff. And I'm just going to double check what year that probably was. I think it was 92. Yeah, I think the same thing happened in 92. We went out there again, though. No, it would have been earlier than that. Probably would have been 90 and 91. But so effectively, it was crazy.
Were you on your vacation? Your parents were like, "Hey, we're just gonna do some shopping. We know that you got a bunch of money. Do whatever you want." And they would take me. Store, or was it like
they would take me to the toy store? It was like we're taking you there. So like Toys R Us was one. It was Vegas, so because that was where my mum's friend was, and like family friend for years. So we kind of, I say mom, it was the family. Like Kelly was friends with mom and dad basically, but we would go and visit them, and stay with friends and stuff, and then that's what we do. And I think there was a couple of like stores where it wasn't just toys, it was more than that. It was like all sorts of different, like kind of like Target, but not at that time. I don't even remember what the stores were. I remember going into Sam's Club, but that wasn't, I don't think they had toys. I can't recall exactly. They might have done back then, but
probably
Sam's Club,
Kmart.
it could have been something like Kmart.
I don't know sort of that far south, but like as a Canadian kid, my parents were from Ontario, which is Eastern Canada.
Just started raining here. I'm not sure if you can hear that.
Is that what that is? I
Yeah.
thought it was. But we would drive to Ontario, which is quite far. Like you look at the map of Canada or the U.S. We're basically driving from the West Coast to the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
But we would go through the U.S. and so my parents would strategically kind of stop at a Kmart or a Target or whatever it was and kind of let us buy one thing, like day one or day two, so that we had something to keep us occupied for the next 3 days of driving or whatever it was. So I feel like I had similar experiences where it was like, you'd go to these shops that were not shops that you were used to and just be overwhelmed by the selection. My biggest problem was always like, I couldn't decide. I didn't have, the luxury of the $200.
By the way, I will say it wasn't a regular thing. Like it was a one-off scenario, but it was one of those things where it's like, I am building this collection.
Well, and I was going to ask, do you think it's partly because it was like such an experience, like that trip, right? And sort of that haul of Joe's was such an experience. Is that why it kind of stayed with you
probably
till now?
I think it's got a strong nostalgic connection, so many facets, so many different kind of like flashpoints for me personally. Like, I'm saying it like it's my flashpoints, but you know what I mean. Like in terms of my personal history, that is the Action Force was a really strong period of just really cool storytelling for me, and obviously the kind of perfect storm of everything combining together. The fact you could actually buy them in stores nearby us. We had a few toy stores nearby. There was a place called Chroma a few miles away from us, up north of the go north on the coast road, and that particular little seaside town had a Starlings. Now Starlings were like these little toy stores that you'd get in all over the UK, I believe, and they were kind of like a Toy Master sort of thing, like a franchise, and they'd all have different names of whoever the franchisee was. So there was a few Starlings, there was a few other kind of different names and stuff, but effectively they were like these Toy Master franchises. And the one in Chroma was tiny. It was like the size. Our apartment now is bigger than the toy store. Like this room of our apartment that I'm in right now is about 4 times the size of this toy store that I used to go in. And it was like you'd go down like it was a small like doorway for one, like hobbits lived in there. I would always have to duck a bit, and you'd go down steps. Like, so you open the door, and immediately there are 2 steps going into the shop, right? And then you're in this little kind of like very tight cavern type thing. There's a middle kind of section of toys, like on a spin and rack type thing. And then there's all the stuff around it, and then the shop person in the corner, like kind of like right there. And it was just like, like you go in, you'd see exactly what you wanted, you'd get it, you pay for it, and your foot's still out the door as you're doing all
you haven't even, the door hasn't closed quite yet because there's no room for all that to happen.
So there was loads of little stores like that. There was a cooperative in Chroma which sold a lot of toys. I remember being very young, going in there to look for our Action Force figures, and they had like a ton of Red Shadow stuff out, Robo Skulls and Hyenas and figures and also like, the whole range almost. But it registered, and I saw it, and then that kind of clicked as to what Joe and Gwen had given me as hand-me-downs. I was like, oh, that must be related to that. But because it wasn't Action Force International Heroes, it was almost like, this is my focus. Like, but I knew it was there, and I registered it, and it was like a thing. And that was my first. That was that was at least my first or my only memory that I can remember seeing Red Shadows and action force, palatable action force on pegs.
On peg, yeah.
But yeah, but like Norwich was the nearest city nearby us, and we had like there was a Toy Master, there was a Gerald's, there was all sorts of kind of big kind of stores that would have huge toy sections and stuff. So I managed to, I got a lot of figures from there. But that was you'd go to Norwich like not every weekend, but when there was like a situation where we did, we'd maybe do shopping or something. Mum and Dad were going to get like a new microwave, or they were going to get like, something else sorted out, or they just wanted to go out for the weekend. You'd go into Gerald's, maybe pick up a few figures, and away you go. There was also this weird, I've told this story before, but there was a weird town in Norfolk called called Wroxham. Hovton and Wroxham. It's like two places, but it's kind of combined. And in that area, that whole town is effectively owned by this guy called Roy, and he had this big store there called Roy's of Wroxham, and the whole town is effectively owned by this guy. Like, so it's his name's on everything. So it's like it's a weird kind of corporate odd thing in the middle of this like Norfolk, town, not a big town, but you drive through it and it's just this store, and you literally drive through it, and then you're over the bridge and you're out of it. But it was magical as a kid, because again, they had this huge department store. You park up, you go in, you get your figures. I got Hydro Viper from there. I got what mask figure did I get? The oh my god, blanking on the name. And I love Vampire. What's the Vampire's driver called? It's the motorcycle. He's got the helmet. His hair sticks out the top of it. Floyd Malloy and Vampire I got from there, and that mask toy is like amazing. And I remember those vividly. But Mum would take me usually if it was like Dad's away or whatever. For the military or in the RAF, or he might be like, he also took a job where he was working away a lot. So after that, Mum and me would often go out, and she might get me like one or two figures here or there, just like a little treat. So I managed to kind of build up a pretty good collection of these figures, just doing those little moments growing up as a lad. But yeah, that was effectively my experience with it. Really, we didn't have a Toys R Us until I was much older, and G.I. Joe wasn't a thing.
No, we didn't either. Yeah,
it sucked, man.
Billionaire mentioned any Canadian kids remember Toy City. I think there's still a Toy City in Vancouver, which is 4 hours away from me, but I think it still exists some places. We never had one, but when you were talking about that tiny little shop, that made me think of like, I think all of us remember, and it was probably even smaller than you remember.
Oh yeah,
because I remember as a kid, like the toy shop that was in the local mall, and it had, I think, if I remember correctly, it had like 5 aisles. So like, the 2 outsides and then like 3 rows to create 5 aisles. Yeah. But I'm convinced that it was not wheelchair accessible. Like it was packed in there. You know what I mean? Like this was 100%. Way before everything had a handrail and a ramp, and you had, if you were in a wheelchair and you were a kid, somebody probably had to bring you stuff from the end of the aisle.
What's interesting, I think the owner of one of those little stores I was telling you about, with like the really difficult, like with this, I think they were in a wheelchair, genuinely. I'm like,
they must have had a back door then, right?
They must. I think they lived there as well, so they probably had like a back entrance and everything, and that was the front side. It's one of those things you just have to kind of see to believe. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, sorry.
I remember too very, very vividly, because we would only go around Christmas time, because there's this city it's not even a city, it's a village it's about 40-minute drive from us. Yeah. And they would have this Christmas parade, and so we would go to this Christmas parade, and it was in the evening. But there was a hardware store, like a tiny little mom and pop hardware store. And only at Christmas time they would have a little toy section, and it was downstairs. Same thing. Like you'd have to go down the stairs to like Santa's workshop, I think it was probably called, or something.
Amazing.
Right? And I remember that I would always get a G.I. Joe, and we would go and do that. And it was just like, and it was like an event, the same thing, right? Like it was just like, it was Christmas time. It was the evening, the lights in the street, and in my memory, it was snowing lightly every time I went, kind of thing. It probably wasn't. It was probably dry as a bone, and there was no snow and whatever. But
I know what you mean though. Like I've got tons. All my memories as a kid, like float around either Christmas, birthday,
Hmm.
or when you go to like one of these stores. Now we didn't
Hmm.
have a Toys R Us, like I said, but my nan and granddad, who were living in Birmingham at the time, that was the Midlands. So we were a good like 3 or 4 hour drive away from them. So we didn't really, we tried to see them as much as we could, but it was again one of those things where that would be an event. We'd have to really kind of make the most of it.
Hmm.
And I remember around Christmas time, or just before Christmas, they took me to the Toys R Us in Birmingham, and I remember this vividly. And I was a good kid. Like I wasn't kind of like, I didn't cry a lot or at all. My mum said that I don't think I cried very much when I was a really young kid either. I think I made up for that when I got to be an adult. I just
I
cry all
was
the
gonna
time now.
say we just do it now.
Oh my god, I'm so emotional now. It's ridiculous. Like I'll watch like a commercial for eggs and just be like in tears, like a car commercial, and just be like, "Wah." It's weird. I don't get it. But anyway, um, I remember. So I wouldn't ask for things, and I certainly wouldn't like kick off or make a scene or anything. I was very like just be a good boy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we went to this Toys R Us in Birmingham, and I remember crossing the street to get to it. It was one of those weird. It must have been one of those ones that was like in a city, not necessarily like didn't have a car park with it, or did,
Hmm.
but you then had to cross the road for it, or
Hmm.
we didn't want to pay for parking. I don't know what the point was. We crossed the road anyway. We get to this Toys R Us. I go in, and like in my head, because obviously memories get messed about and
Hmm.
changed. In my head, this thing is like 40 stories high
Yeah,
and just
yeah,
keeps
yeah,
going. It's like
yeah.
New York or something. Like it's like skyscrapers. But no,
Hmm.
it was just a freaking awesome Toys R Us.
Hmm.
And I remember like what it was. It was a thing where I was picking things out so they would like get them on the sly. So I'd have stuff for Christmas and
Yeah, yeah,
birthday,
yeah,
what have you.
yeah.
So
Your parents probably would have had to do the same thing, right? Where you'd be like, "Oh, these are my three favorites," and your mom would be like, "Okay, we're gonna go to the next shop," and Dad has to go do something else.
it
You'd be
was
like, "Okay."
no doubt it was, or I was so oblivious to things they probably just bought it in front of me and I wouldn't have known. But like
Yeah.
the thing was though, I remember Nan and Grandad wanted to buy me something there, and I was in at that point. I was really into dressing up like cosplay, but as a kid, dressing up like as
Yeah,
a
yeah,
kid. Like
yeah,
that's not
yeah.
cosplay. It's just
It wasn't called that, but
no,
yeah.
it was just, you did it. Like I've got another cracking image of me dressed up as He-Man, which I think you may have seen, where I've
Hmm.
got this like cross strap going like naked, cross strap and just this like little pair of furry
Shorts, the little
briefs on. Yeah, it
shorts.
was
Yeah.
hilarious. Anyway, so I was really into Spider-Man as well at the time. And I'd mentioned before going there something about dressing up like Spider-Man, or could we I was asking mom if she could help me make a Spider-Man costume.
Hmm. Hmm.
So my granddad comes out of one of the aisles with holding a the kind of the basket, and in there is a kid's Spider-Man outfit. Like, and I'm like, oh no, you don't have to buy me it. I'm gonna, I'm cool with dressing up, and I convinced them not to buy me it. So like I was the opposite of one of those kids that's like, yeah, I want this, I want that. I
Hmm.
literally convinced them, don't worry, you don't have to get it for me. I'm just going to dress up at home kind of thing. Like, so, but funnily enough, I did regret that because I thought, man, that had actually been really cool as a
That would have
kid.
been a great
That'd have
costume
been
to
so
have.
neat.
Yeah.
And they were so like, generous and kind and
Hmm.
loving. And yeah, I have an amazing family, and
Hmm.
had in some cases amazing grandparents, and yeah, I couldn't have asked for a better childhood. And I think that's one of the
Hmm.
reasons why I'm so obsessed with GI
Why
Joe
you're stuck
now.
being a child.
Exactly, why I'm still a child is because, and it's that nostalgic feeling. It's that the feeling around all of it is
Yeah.
very emotionally
Hmm.
charged as well. Like it's like I was very, it didn't matter what you bought me. If you bought me a present, whatever it was, I would genuinely be grateful.
Hmm.
Like I would be like, one, you didn't have to do that. Two, I don't expect you to do something like that. That's not necessarily something I don't feel entitled enough to be like, I'm going to tell you what I want. You buy it for me.
Yeah.
It was like a thing of, if you got me something, I loved it, and it was a genuine feeling. And I still feel that way today. Like even
Yeah.
if it's something that you might think, oh, that's crap or whatever. I'd be like, no. If someone bought me Falcon today, I'd be like, that's really kind. Thank you very much, and I would love it. even though
Yeah.
that head sculpt is terrible. And
Yes. Yeah.
you know what I'm saying. But yeah,
There
there's a
has
lot,
to be a worse figure. It just happens to be Falcon.
of course. But you know what I mean. Like I don't necessarily, because I don't. That's the thing. I never wanted for anything. I was never left wanting
Yeah.
anything. So why would I ask for stuff? You know. So it's being spoiled, but in a way that made me not necessarily personality wise spoiled, because I was just given things
Because you
that
just had
sometimes,
everything.
yeah, that I didn't want. I was the only child as well. Like I do have a half brother, David, who I'm really close with now, as well. Like, but at the time, it was a weird one because I obviously my dad was with, had a family before mom and me in a sense, right? So he had that family, then obviously got with mom, and then had me, and so I've got this half brother, David, who we we ended up going out kind of like in. He ended up kind of being distancing a little bit, right? And we didn't catch up again until I was in the States, until I lived out here in Missouri. So like a couple of years back now, like it's what, 6 years now, I think, or 5 years at that point. But he ended up reaching out and saying, like, all sorts of stuff happened, and we ended up kind of like getting back together again, and him and my mum and dad, reconnected, and it's been great since, obviously, with having that, because I looked up to him. He was in the forces as well. He went in the RAF like dad did. Like he kind of followed his dad a little bit in that sense. And yeah, it was kind of a bit weird at first, but obviously as a kid, I just looked up to him. I thought he was really cool, and he would come and visit every now and again.
Right.
But then all of a sudden, just for whatever reason, we hardly saw him ever for a while, and then it was years. There was no contact all of a sudden, and then eventually, we kind of reconnected in later life. But because of that, I can't even remember what my point was in that sense. But he was another one of that kind. I suppose because I was talking about being an only child, but because of that, like I looked up to him, and he also got me into loads of things like the Ghostbusters. He was a brilliant artist, so he drew like crazy fantasy style, like Frazetta style stuff. And we write to each other as well. And he sent me a letter, like a pen pals type of situation. He sent me that with this sketch of this incredible, like, I'm like, dude, like this is insane. And he drew this amazing real Ghostbusters, like huge bit of artwork that I took in for show and tell at my school. And like I helped him with like outlining some of it. I didn't do any of it really, but like I helped him with a bit and like tried to claim that me and my brother did this, at school. But it was incredible, and yeah, he's still great, and we get on really well now. So it's awesome. Yes, I am really old. I'm like, what am I now? I'm 40. What year is it? I'm 42, and I'm 43 this year in November. So I've never even. How old are you, Adam? Do you mind saying? Are you allowed to say?
40. I was 41 in July.
Happy birthday for July.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I'm when I listen to you, I think part of the reason that you and I get along so well, I'm the oldest of three, but we're similar in age, and I think we're similar in like temperament and sort of like, because I'm the same way. My birthday comes and goes, and I typically don't say anything. I don't care to celebrate it. I want for nothing, and for that reason, I'm happy with anything. And childhood too, like, it's weird, right? Because I'm in Canada, which is so much closer to the US, but still it's a foreign country. It's a foreign land. I mean, I don't think people quite grasp how different Canada and the US are. It's a little bit like, there's a lot of countries that border each other that seem
England, Scotland,
similar on the surface, but like when you actually like get a little deeper, you're like, these places are nothing alike. Like they don't really match up in the same way. And and so I remember, going to the US and like trips to the US and like the toy sections there. Even though we had great toy sections here, they weren't the same as the toy sections. Now maybe that's again memory kind of
it's
planting something that's sort of like this magical thing where it was like, maybe I just bought more toys because we were on vacation kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like it had nothing to do with the size of the toy section or anything. But I mean, we used to even just go down. Like we're only about an hour and a half from the border, but then it's sort of another hour to like the next. I think it is. I don't even know. I haven't gone in a long time, but it's two and a half or 3 hours drive to sort of a major or big enough American city that we would go and do like back to school shopping.
What's the procedure when you drive across the border? Do you have to like have your passport and all that kind of stuff? But it's just a drive through in like a toll booth or something, right? Or do you have to get out and
basically? And funny that you actually asked, because like the specific one that we would go to was someone's house, and it just had like a gate that she would have to. Oh, it was a woman, and she would have to open it. But she worked both sides of it because it was just her house on the border. And so you'd kind of roll up and you'd honk your horn, and she'd come out and she'd go, "Okay, where are you going?" Blah blah blah. And you go, "We're going. We're going to for us. We were going to Spokane for some back to school shopping." She'd go, "Okay, great." And she'd lift up the gate, and then we'd go for our weekend trip, and you'd drive back, and we'd get to the gate on the other side, and you'd honk, and she'd come out.
That's amazing.
I think she maybe had a different hat or something. I don't know how it works. And then she'd open. What'd you buy? Kind of thing. Like she's just a friendly lady.
That's amazing.
There must have been more people that worked there, but in my head, again, it was just a lady in a house.
That's brilliant.
It was a house. I don't know that it still is. That's that's going back some time. But
I wonder if it's
it was passports and we always had a minivan. It was always
full body cavity searches, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. But they'll only do it once a year, and then they check it off. So brilliant. The next time you're like, "But I already got it."
I'll prove it. Let's see. You've already been in there. Anyway, yeah. Amazing.
But yeah, I mean,
in terms of nostalgia connection, there's so much like I said, like the strong nostalgia and feeling connected to all of these different things. I was able, because like I said, I was talking about being an only child. I still managed to collect turtles. I really love turtles as well. I had He-Man was my first. So my first ever action figure was actually He-Man and Battle Cat. That was the first action figure I had. Then I had a huge Masters of the Universe collection. Between me and my mate Johnny Reynolds, we had everything that was released in the United Kingdom for Masters of the Universe, including, and my dad used to hate this because I would set it all up in the hallway of our very small house. I'd have Castle Grayskull on one side, Snake Mountain on the other, and then all the figures would just be like laid around all over the place, and just be like, it'd be like one of those like minefields kind of scenarios.
Yeah, and the hallway's 3 feet wide, so
exactly.
There's 8 inches in between the two of them.
But again, like loved Master of the Universe, but I sold all that as a kid. Sold all my turtles, sold all my Thundercats. Pretty much anything I had, you name it, I had it, and then also sold it when I was a kid. But always kept G.I. Joe. All my action force as a kid, all my G.I. Joe. I think I kept Visionaries, I kept M.A.C.L.E.O.D and a few other bits and pieces. But for the most part, I sold everything. I even sold all my Star Wars toys, which was the biggest mistake. Mum and Dad always go on about this because it was their fault, really. They said, we're going to go to a car boot or a, what do you guys call it? Flea market or like flea
market.
You know what I mean?
It's the most similar thing.
Yeah. So, you drive up onto the field, you open your car bonnet or trunk, sorry. You open your car trunk and you put all, a little table out there and you sell all your stuff, your wares, basically. And people just walk around the field like, that kind of thing, right? And we set up and this box of Star Wars toys, including like, the Hoth Speeder and like friggin' all these really cool toys and vehicles and I've even got a picture of me as a stormtrooper, and in that picture you can see the speeder bike on the table, on the chair next to me, and that I think I might have that at hand. I might not have it at hand, and if I don't have it at hand, I won't bother boring you while I look for it. But that was one of those situations where we get there, we put the stuff down, and people were on us in seconds because we were selling it for like, £1, like 50p a figure. And, I had a lot of figures and a lot of rare ones as well. And and
it was probably a little later, right? So they probably already, there was a little bit of value in them already, right?
Definitely. And that they knew exactly what we had. They bought it all, and that was that. And I think I made £14
But at the time, you're probably like, "Yay, 14 pounds! I'm gonna buy more GI Joes."
I probably did, and I probably did buy like Outback and Road Pig and all those. Yeah, exactly. I'm not. You know, it was one of those things where I wish I'd kept all of my toys as a kid. I just wish I had done, but it just wouldn't have been practical. Like we'd have been in a position where I'm in now, where I've got far too much stuff and nowhere to store it. So that's, you know, and that would have been difficult for mum and dad to have to deal with, even though they have to deal with my collection now. Most of it's in the UK in their possession. So yeah,
that was for me
hilarious.
as I moved out and sort of left all my toys at my parents' house, but then it was all in big bins, and I had probably 3 or 4 of the bins that I had sort of shuffled around with me. As my parents downsized, I would have to kind of take one more bin, and about 7 or 8 years ago, like I had moved in with my now wife. She was like, what are all these bins? And I was like, it's toys and it's all my childhood stuff.
Don't worry about it. Nothing. It's fine. Just ignore it.
More or less, yeah. But then the house that I'm in now, we built, and when we were sort of packing up a whole house to move it, I thought, I can't keep moving this stuff from house to house. And at that time, I was actually like collecting and building Lego, and I said, okay, if there's going to be room for the Lego, everything else has to go. Everything that's been in a bin has to go. And this is like to this day, I still feel this way. Like if it goes in a bin, I need to get rid of it, because if I don't have room to display it, what's the point? I'll take a picture of it, put it on Hoarder, and then I'll have a memory of it.
Nice.
I'll have a memory of it, and sort of the memory of owning it will be enough, and I'll kind of move on. But
I get that 100%.
But I do wish that I could get back a few of the things that I sold, because it's part of it too is that it was so recent, and it's sort of like now. And let's fast forward. We'll get into sort of a little bit more modern stuff now. We'll shift gears a little bit. Basically, for me, when I had gotten back into action figures by way of Marvel Legends, but I was still doing mostly Lego stuff. And then when the classified line got announced, I was like, it was like the switch got flipped back on, and I was like, I am a G.I. Joe fan. I always have been. I hadn't been paying attention. Like I hadn't been paying attention since, basically since the 3 3/4 inch stuff was more or less done. Yeah. So like kind of mid to late 90s. Kind of after I graduated from high school, that was kind of it, right? Things change. I'm moving out of my house. I'm like, it's not the same, right? I'm not going shopping with my parents anymore. So I'm not, it was, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't that I was like, I'm done with that stuff. It's kid stuff. I was still the same as you. I was still like, I'm still a kid. I still do kid stuff, and I'm foolish and impetuous and whatever. But I just wasn't buying it because I wasn't in the shops that were selling it. But then, I'm by that time, my oldest is 7 years old, and I was sort of, I had a kid, and I was in Toys R Us again because buying baby stuff. So I blame my wife for me getting back into action figures, but she claims it's not my fault. But the classified line gets announced, and I was just like, I need these. I need these in a big way. And so before that, though, that was sort of me getting back into G.I. Joe, and that's kind of when I figured out what you were doing. When did you start the Full Force podcast channel? Yeah, that's a good point. Sort of start doing what you're doing now. It was a little bit before Classified came out, but that'll be the second part. Like, how much did that do for the channel?
So also, by the way, I've located that little toy store in Cromer. I went on Google Street View, right? Now this, what I'll show you here is the little street. So
this is the tiny one.
This is Church Street, right, in Cromer. So there's, you can see the church in the distance, kind of there, right? So the actual sea, or the beach, is kind of off this way somewhere. So there's like another street behind this, right? Now in this street here, if we kind of like just flip it round, you see a little kind of these little shops. This one here, this Inspired place, which has got a lot of sun on it at the moment, that is what used to be that little toy shop. And you can see kind of like to a degree like the there you go. So you can see
That's
like the
perfect.
door going into the doorway and like how it drops down, and you can but that was like the whole toy store right there, just that little kind of.
And it's one of those ones where like there's 3 doors, right? So you'd go to the toy store, you'd go somewhere else, and then
the other
somebody probably lives up above.
The other 2 doors weren't there at the time. It was, if you imagine, the windows just went all the way around.
Okay.
So it was one room. And now what they've done is they've obviously split this into different sections in the future. But that was the building, effectively, that was in. Now, sorry, I just wanted to give you a visual of that tiny little place. Now, in terms of the full force, wow, okay, so... we switched sides.
It's weird. I'm
there we go. That's better. Yeah, thanks. It's weird. You've got to be on that side. Yeah.
Well, the way that I look at my screen too. When I look at my screen, I know that I point that way to you. But if we switch it, I'll continue to point that way. But you'll be on the other side. Anyway.
It's weird. It's I'll just do that.
Yeah.
So okay, full force. That's an interesting one. So I got kind of when I went to high school, I kind of ended up kind of like really getting out of toys and stuff in a big way. My last thing I collected was from a Starlings in Stalham. It wasn't Stalham, it was Holt. And I picked up all these random Norfolk town names that no one's going to know what I'm talking about. But I remember getting, I think it was Destro, the one with the big collar and the kind of like pizza thrower type thing, the distro, and General Flag, and Snake Eyes version 4, those kind of figures, right? I remember those being like the last
all those
few
great figures.
Grunt as well. I love that Grunt figure with the orange pants. Loved him. Anyway, so got all that's that was like the last throes of my GI Joe collecting as a child. High school comes along, takes out your entire, that's your focus at that point then. And I didn't even realize that they'd stopped selling toys at like, they'd stopped doing the G.I. Joe line in like the, 94 for us, but it was 93 technically for us, but we were still having them on shelves in 94 and 95. But that was it then. But I wasn't aware because I wasn't into it. I didn't get back into it again until 25th anniversary. But just prior to 25th anniversary, I was picking up comic packs and those kind of like sets they were doing, like kind of online only sort of deals. And I had delved into Sigma 6 a little bit. So I had kind of like delved into that. But then, so I was kind of like tickling back into like the G.I. Joe kind of universe. And then I got back into it a big way. The 25th came along, and then it's just been non-stop since then, pretty much.
Yeah.
The Full Force podcast came about because I got into doing conventions with my good friend Nick Wells at In Demand Toys. So I'd go to their shop, and that's where I buy a lot of the product. And we got friendly over the years. And I remember they moved shops about 3 times before we were proper friends. And I remember they were in they're in this location in the center of Norwich, opposite HMV for anyone that cares. And I was in that store talking to Nick, and we were chatting away, and we were closer at this point. We were much closer kind of friends, and I'd go in there a lot more. And he said to me, "Do you want to come to this convention?" And it was an auto assembly. It was a Transformers convention in the UK, one of the biggest in Europe, maybe the biggest in Europe, probably still is. And it's TF Nation now. And so that was the first con I went to with them. I went with them and I helped, and it was amazing. And I met loads of people. I met Dave Tree there, who was quite big in the Action Force community. He quite big in the Star Wars community, and he'd done like lots of historian work. And he was good friends with all the people that worked on the brand, including Bob Breakin, and like he knew a lot of people in that arena. So I got really pally and friendly with Dave. And then we were talking one day on the phone, and he was a talker, Dave, big talker, love him to death. And we were talking on the phone, and we were a few hours into this conversation, and he said, I've got this mate called Eddie, who I said to him, actually, I want to do a podcast, because at the time I was working in music. I was working at a music college, so I was doing a lot of production stuff, and I was into recording and all that kind of stuff. I was really into it. And I said to him, I really want to do a podcast, because they were big at the time. What's on Joe Mind was also out at the time, and I was listening to them a lot. And I remember talking to Dave about it, and he said, yeah, I've got this mate Eddie you might want to join in as well. He's a huge Palatoy Action Force collector. I said, yeah, let's do an Action Force G.I. Joe podcast. And I'm like, we were chatting away, and I'm like, let's call it the Full Force, because you know how that was the battle cry on the cartoon. And he's like, yeah, that's a great idea, let's do that. So we kind of like, came up with this idea on the spot. Then I went away and I did loads of like like not research, but like prep and stuff, like prep documents and stuff like that, to make it really tight. And then we did the first episode, which was audio only. First time I met Eddie, and Eddie was a crazy character. And you can still access these episodes, by the way. Like, you can find them on all sorts of places. But we did the first episode, and surprisingly, I've listened to that back recently, and I was like, actually, this is not bad. Like, it's not bad. Like, it's not. You listen to some old stuff, and you're like, no, it's like smooth. It's funny. I'm like, damn, we did all right. And we basically got in with What's on Joe Mind, and they put us on their channel. So So we were like, kind of like, effectively, they called us their sister podcast, which didn't make much sense. But we were like this, this connected kind of family of events of content, I guess. And we would, do episodes. They weren't like super regular. We would try and get them done like monthly, but it was, difficult to get the time, and there's a lot of prep involved. We would do like the news of the week, and we would do thematic kind of things. And then we got Boss Fight Studio involved, and they were doing custom Boss Fight builds, it was called, and they would do custom chats about how you could make SAS Eagle, but using the modern 4-inch figures, things like that. And it was fun, and we got it got like a decent kind of like following and everything. And then we kind of went our separate ways from What's on Joe Mind. So this was, what year was this? Probably like 2010.
And it's still audio only at that point.
Yeah, this is all audio only. We hadn't done video really at that point. And we got into video when I wanted to do more news-based stuff. And I wanted to be more on the kind of money with it, and like, getting it out quickly and doing all that kind of stuff. So we kind of dabbled with this new format called the News Burst, and that was a video format, and it was labor intensive, of course. We'd have to get, I was still getting like, I think our first episode was about, it was like a convention, or it was like a convention, and like, what else? Oh, it was Toy Fair. It was the first couple of episodes, and of course, Toys R Us was going under at the time as well. So we were kind of doing news about that. And I remember Toy Fair, there was loads of stuff going on. So we had to like, we were talking about all these new things and everything, and it was like tangentially ever so slightly related to G.I. Joe at times, but we were kind of doing that. And we'd also been doing audio episodes so long. Like, we did a Transformers episode that was over 10 hours long. We did Visionaries. We did a Visionaries episode, audio only, but it was like you followed along with show notes, because it was image heavy. We were discussing, like, so we would do, we picked a brand, because it was during the Hasbro Cinematic Universe thing, when they were trying to force all of the brands together: Visionaries, ROM, Action Man, G.I. Joe, etc., etc. So what we did was we broke all of those down, and we did like a separate audio episode special on each brand. And what I'd do is we would have a little banter thing at the beginning, a bit of intro. I would make new music for it, so it would be related to that brand. We would have different segments broken down, so it would be like figure history, where we talk about the history of the brand. With unreleased stuff, where we'd get Pat and another good friend of mine.
Pat, who you still do episodes with.
Oh, well, Pat Stewart, obviously. Sorry, I'll come back to that in a second. But we do these like little segments of like unreleased and like, crazy like stuff, and we get into it in a big way. We had the Mapes on when we did the Transformers, and the Mapes twins have got this incredible Transformers collection, and also Knowledge, and they're the ones that post all these incredible, like, never before heard cartoon, episodes that never made it, just the audio that was recorded, things like that. And we got them on. We talked, like, it was insane. And these huge audio episodes, and I'd get Brian to do a beautiful artwork, toy photography for the for the images and stuff like that. And we really go to town on these things. Did Visionaries one, we did, and I'd make music that would relate to these episodes as well. So it was hugely, huge amount of work and effort went into these. We did, like I said, 10 hours for Transformers, 9 hours for Visionaries, because we were talking about that whole Series 2 unreleased stuff. It just got really interesting, and I don't know, like, a lot of people really enjoyed that because it was like they could just listen for ages at work, or they could, and some people were like, dude, you need to break this up into parts. Like, are you kidding me? I can't listen to a 10-hour thing. But I don't know how or why that happened, but that's just how they happened. And and then obviously we did the Newsburst stuff. We did, and that went through a little bit of a kind of development phase where people were like, we were doing like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and it's like, they're not news bursts. That's like a whole episode.
That's a show.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a show. So what I ended up having to try and do was make news bursts small, and the other things that we did would be other related content, but it would be specifically about, something else or whatever. So we kind of had to work out the branding and all that kind of stuff. And we're at the point now where we've got some amazing graphics from Brian Sauer, and we've kind of grown into this thing where, since then, obviously Dave and Eddie have kind of retired from the game. So it's been slightly different in terms of the presenters that have come and gone. But now it's kind of like me and Pat do a weekly, and the news bursts are mainly me, but we get Justin on to do the monthly as well.
Yeah.
And occasionally we'll get other people involved. We get Paddy Lennon and Brian Hickey and Adam Riches and whoever is part of that kind of Full Force family. We tend to kind of do that kind of stuff now. So it's grown, it's developed, it's changed, and now it's something completely different, really. Yeah. That's pretty much it, I think.
You kind of talked about
everything.
It. Did you, when you started out, did you have any aspirations or any ambitions with it, or were you just like, let's do this? This is just going to be a fun thing, and we're gonna was it just Go ahead.
It's a bit of both, honestly, because we did it. It was one of those things where I'm one of those people who's like, I want to do something, I'm just going to do it. And I'll learn about certain things a lot as we go. We'll work out certain kinks as we go, which we have done. We still have similar kinks in some cases, but you know what I mean. We worked some of the issues out of to kind of smooth it out a little bit. But I'm one of those people that's like, oh, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do it until I've done it, and then move on to the next thing. And with the show, it was like, I was like, I was just really excited to do it. I wanted to talk G.I. Joe with people. I wanted to get people on and talk about this stuff. I just saw that comment from RKW where he says, little does Chris know his mum sold all his Joes. Mate, you'd be surprised how much my mum knows about G.I. Joe and how much of a fan she is. Like, it's crazy. Mum and dad, really. But mum blows my mind because Kate and I were visiting one year and we were talking about stuff. And this is just a fun story. I like telling about my mom. And I think I said something like, oh, it was one of the desert guys. And mum went, Dusty? And Kate was like, huh? How did you know that? And like, I'm kind of like, where did you pick that up from? That's impressive. She because the thing, she would watch the cartoon when I was watching it. She would be involved in that, when I go out and buy stuff there, when they buy stuff for Christmas, she was well involved in that stuff. She remembers all that stuff. Crazy. And so she's definitely, it's impressive what she knows. Honestly, she would be the first to say she's not as hardcore as us. Like, she's not going to know the unreleased stuff or whatever, but she's going to have a good idea of what we're talking about in terms of characters. And that really does blow my mind sometimes. Yeah. In any case, so I can't even remember what I was talking about on that one. What was I even talking about before we got to that? Oh, the show. So
ambitions.
In terms of ambitions, like, I wanted to we did it. We got into it so quick that we didn't really have a time to think about where we wanted it to go. We were we were just like, let's do it because we wanted to do it and it sounded fun. And then it just grew a bit, and it grew and it changed and it developed. She knows the market value, definitely, 100%. Now she does anyway. Since she sold
if she has sold them, hopefully she's gotten market value for them.
No, Mom, she'll sell it for more now. They've made that mistake with Star Wars toys.
Right.
So yeah, like we didn't really have that plan of where it was going. So it's really something that's developed and naturally grown. And initially, we just wanted to get it out to the same audience what Sunjo Mind had, and they had a pretty big audience at that point. Mm-hmm. Some of their shows are doing like 40,000 kind of hits for a show. Because it was around the time that the movie was big, and they got John Chu on, and they managed to kind of like strike, while the iron was hot, and also like again. They were the only real gig in town. No disrespect to Flag Points. Shout out to Dave Flag Points. Love Dave and love Flag Points. But that was, I think Flag Points came after. I might be wrong on that one actually, and I apologize to Dave if that is the case. But I remember they were all doing quite well at the time because it was G.I. Joe and there was not many of them. G.I. Joeberg was another one. Did great numbers early on because they were the only gig in town. There was a few like that. It was a small community, but everyone kind of knew what everyone else was doing because you were listening and watching that. That's you were consuming it because that was all you had. Yeah. And so we didn't really have an idea as to what we wanted it to be. We just knew we just did it, and then all of a sudden it kind of grew a bit. And then since then, I've had aspirations of what I want it to be, and I want it to be a bigger channel, and I wanted to kind of move it to kind of YouTube and have we kind of shifted over to YouTube a bit more. The focus went that direction because the Facebook kind of video stuff was getting arduous to post all this stuff and put all the information on, and it's just easier now to just do it as like live shows that put it everywhere for you. Do you know what I mean? Like just dealt with that way.
Yeah.
And then everything else is, a little bit easier now. So one of the things I wanted to do was obviously take some of the editing away because obviously doing the 10-hour audio podcast was getting to be a drag, but then moving into video, that was even freaking harder and took up more processing power. So, things had to be improved. Laptops had to be improved. Software had to be improved. Equipment had to be improved. I did a whole like series on, if you're a patron of our show, then you can go back all the way to the first videos I posted, which were things like making of the Full Force, which I did like a video series of how you could, set up your own little kind of show. I'll probably release that eventually, but the problem is it's so old fashioned now. It doesn't make any sense.
People will be like, that's not how you do it.
It's true. Most of the stuff I do now, it's easy. I just go to StreamYard and do that. It's easy.
Click. Oh, live. You're good to go.
Obviously, there's other things you take into consideration, like the graphics that you might have to do, but you get someone professional to do that.
Yeah,
and then sorted.
You should. Not all,
But that's that.
Actually,
those kind of things.
David Bax, who did this graphic behind us. But
it's cool. I like it. I love.
It's great,
graphics.
Man.
Yeah, it's really nice. I love your show. I wouldn't be on it all the time if I wasn't a fan. But yeah, I think there was no real. Initially there was no real idea of where it was going. We just had a basic idea of what we wanted to do, and we just really, it was all about talking about the stuff that we wanted to talk about and have an excuse to talk about it. It's weird. I didn't really necessarily want to call Dave up and just talk G.I. Joe every time I wanted to do it. I wanted to do it properly.
Right.
And do it that way. So
formally, you wanted to talk to him formally about G.I. Joe.
Yes, I wanted to be structured.
Yes.
With professional.
Here's how we're going to talk about it. Here's where we're going to go from. Yeah. No, I mean I'm in the same boat too. It's sort of like I'm like I said, I'm kind of small Western Canadian. Yeah, it's not small, but I mean there's other G.I. Joe people.
Munsley.
It's not Munsley. It's not Munsley, but it's not Norwich. Which doesn't mean much to most people.
I'm just going to show you on a map where Munsley and Cromer are, guys. There you go.
Oh, I could probably do that too, actually.
There you go. Look, so there's Cromer at the top.
Hold on, let me embiggen you.
Embiggen's the strongest man. So there's Cromer at the top there. Look, they've got Overstrand going down the coast, Trimmingham. There's Munsley. Tiny
Little Munsley
little
on the
place.
coast.
Look at the beach, though, right there on the beach. Our house was right on the cliff as well. I didn't mention that, did I, before? So we had.
I knew that. You didn't mention that today, but yeah.
Yeah, it was.
How's the backyard, by the way? Still receding into the ocean, or is that
Yeah. Well,
fixed?
it wasn't our
That was the
yard
neighbor,
technically. It
but
was the neighbor. But
yeah.
I'll show you here. Okay, here's an aerial shot, and you can even see the erosion, which is crazy. So that's an aerial shot of this house here. This one here, like this big mansion type thing. That is the erosion going in down the cliff.
Yeah.
And as you can see, if I move this down, you can see the beach there. But that's the erosion that happened. And
That's
our
bonkers.
house was right there. Hang on. Let me get it so I can actually show you. So you see those two like double houses, kind of there. That's ours, right there with the driveway.
So you're on the street, and he was kind of back a little bit.
Yeah, so you can see our garden. If I zoom right in, that was our house on. So that one block, we were on the left-hand side, and Joe Eakins and Gwen were on the other side.
Oh,
and
okay,
there's a little fence separating the two gardens. We had a little patio and a garage, and the patio had a basketball net on it as well, because obviously they got me a basketball net from a Toys R Us in, I want to say that was in Peterborough, and we drove back with me and my mate Jamie in the back, right, with the you know how they have them packed in like IKEA flat packs, like a pole and the basketball backboard and everything, but it's huge. And we were like having to drive back for about 2 hours like this in the back of the car with the basketball net over me and Jamie, and just like crunched up in the back. Like,
was it the adjustable one?
Yeah, it was adjustable, but it was adjustable where you had to like unscrew it and adjust it. So it wasn't it wasn't one of them jobs. It wasn't a hand crank. It wasn't a hand crank job.
It was what?
It wasn't a hand job. It was one where you had to, unfortunately, it was a pole that you put in the ground, and then you put cement in it, concrete, and then you cap the top of it. So it was in there solid. And then you put the arm would go on it, but it was this beautiful backboard. It was like a carbon graphite one. So it was this kind of like nice marbly gray kind of design with the black interior border. So it was the curved top, and then the straight, and then the cut, like that shape.
Like the proper shape, not
like
just the rectangle.
Yeah, not just
a plywood one where somebody
wasn't
NBA.
It was like a cool street ball one, right? And it had like the black, I said, the black border, interior border, and then the black square. It was amazing. Love that thing. And it had an NBA logo on it, and it had a spring-mounted hoop as well. And I remember because it was on the seaside, so the air's a bit salty and rust happens, right? And I remember we were doing this little mini dunk contest. We'd lowered it a bit so we could do the dunk contest. And I remember dunking on it, and the thing snapped at the base, and I brought the whole thing down on the pole and just laid it on the ground and was like, that's a shame.
Shaq style.
Yeah, proper shacked it. So I ended up we basically threw the pole away and unscrewed everything, and the backboard and rim was in my bedroom for the rest of its life, just in my bedroom, just taking
full size backboard.
Yeah.
Most people get the little one with the suction cups, on the back of their door that they throw a sock through. You had a full size basketball.
Hardly fit in there as well, because it's a tiny house. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. So, yeah.
Arcade W1138 suffering from no full force this weekend.
Sorry.
And Neil Hill, who's joined us, said amen.
Genuinely, right, this week has been kind of busy in my actual job. And because the full force is just a side gig. And it's a side gig that takes up every other minute and second of my entire life. Now, I've been doing like the morning things, but genuinely it's been crazy hectic in the last couple of weeks. Well, so I was squeezing stuff out when I could, but I got to this week, and it was just a case of like the fact that it's kind of calmed down a little bit. I want to do more live stuff. Don't get me wrong. I want to just do lives for the sake of it. And that will happen, by the way, when we get kind of, because another thing that's kind of going on at the moment is Kate and I are looking to buy a house. So we're doing that whole process. And obviously that takes a lot of time and effort and energy. So that's another thing, that when we move into that place, there's going to be more content, 100%, because it's going to be a
Yeah.
case where I don't have to like bother my wife, who is like just an arm's length away from me most of the time, having to listen to me yelling to, about this stuff. So there's going to be a lot more of that stuff where I have the opportunity. I'll be doing live streams more often, and we'll get more of that kind of more regular kind of feeling. Because at the moment, and the weekly had to kind of pause because Saturday we had a meeting where we had to go and talk to realtors and stuff like that. So that was one of the things, and I just didn't want to, what's the point in doing a show when there's not much to talk about as well? So I apologize, but we will definitely have one next weekend. And then obviously when we do that one, we'll be finishing early, a little bit early, so that we don't overlap with ARMA, Assembly Required Mobile Online Rally.
Neil Hill asked, and this is, and I RKW1138 answered below, and I think it's probably accurate. Neil Hill, I want to know how Chris began the whole constant innuendo thing. RKW1138, it's just a British thing. I think that's pretty accurate. I mean,
I'm going to blame my dad for this one, because I am literally my dad. When it comes to humor, I am my father. 100%. Everything you hear from me has just been recycled, slightly retooled a little bit, slightly maybe a couple of repaints in there, but for the most part, it is my dad's jokes. It's my dad's humor. Yeah, blame my dad, David M.A.C.L.O.E.D McLeod.
But I think it is. I think the innuendo and sort of the cheekiness is a very British.
Pretty much. It's carry on, isn't it? Carry on and Benny Hill and all that crap.
And I mean, you know this because we've discussed this lots, but like I'm a huge Anglophile, and I've watched so much British TV, whether it's sitcoms, talk shows, drama. Like I have a weird affinity for British stuff.
Yeah.
And so again, part of the reason that we get along so well is because we like the same stuff. Totally. It's not G.I. Joe.
Totally.
And yeah, the innuendo thing, I think is
can't help myself.
It's just you either have that sort of sense of humor or you don't, I think. Because I think I'll be honest, there are definitely people in my life that don't care for it. That will kind of nudge me every time.
Of course.
And I'm like, well, I mean, it is what it is.
I get away with it though, especially in most scenarios, because I'm British. So like if I'm in Britain, doesn't matter because everyone's doing it anyway. But if I come out here, I can say so much, and everyone just goes, "Oh, I love your accent," and they're not. Half the time, they're not
British. That's just what he does.
They're not even listening to what I'm saying. The amount of times I've had that face when I'm trying to explain something to someone who is not British, and I'm like saying something very clearly, very slowly, very articulated. I'm not someone that, mumbles or anything like that. Like I'm very clear with what I'm saying a lot of the time. And they'll look at me and they'll go, huh? What? Because you're just not used to hearing it. And therefore, you have to kind of let that compute a little bit first. And so, yeah. And there will be things I say that don't quite have the cultural connection or whatever. It misses somewhere.
Yeah.
It happens with Kate all the time. She'll be like, "What are you talking about?" And then
you reference something that she just doesn't know.
Yeah, 100%.
The eels one was one of the I remember the first time that sort of came up, and I remember, and it still happens. It still happens almost every time you do it. When somebody goes, "What's that from?" And I want to just jump in and be like, "Well, let me tell you something. This is the greatest TV show that's ever existed."
It's weird, Mighty Boosh.
It's the Mighty Boosh for anybody who's watching.
I think it has to, because it's silly, but it's actually quite cerebral, and it's deeper than it appears. Like the humor is on its surface ridiculous, juvenile, stupid, not really, a bit confusing, but then when you understand it, it's like, oh my god, this is so funny. Like it's
layers and the callbacks and like you said, like the depth of what they're actually crafting in a lot of the jokes is I don't think anybody else has sort of ever done it that well or done
it at all. Yeah.
Well, nobody's really trying to do that because it's so absurd. But we were driving Oh, when was it? Friday morning. We were driving my two girls to their grandparents because they watched them on Fridays. And my 4-year-old had eaten a banana. And you know where I'm going to go with this.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said to her, "Oh, you didn't finish your banana." And she said, "No, I didn't want all of it." I said, "Well, you got to either eat it or get rid of it. Otherwise, all the spider's eggs in there will hatch." She said, "What?" I said, the brown bits in bananas. That's spider's eggs." And she
Amazing.
goes, "No way." And my 7-year-old goes, "That's not true." I said, "Have you ever heard of a banana spider?" And they said, "No." And I said, "Okay, well, a banana spider is the spider that puts the eggs in." I said, "But don't worry. If the banana is like edible, it's fine. If the banana gets like to the point where it's rotten, that's when the eggs get like to hatch.
Dude, that
So
is
if you
like,
dispose of it before that." But the
you've given them a
spider's
complex
eggs
now.
is bananas having spider's eggs is from the Mighty Boosh, and it's
You've
just like,
they have got a complex with bananas now, haven't they?
oh yeah, 100%, 100% they do.
No, that is 100%. Yeah, that is Mighty Boosh all the way. And again, that's one of those things where I watched it with friends, and it was one of those things where it was in that time period and what we were doing and everything, and it just yeah, it stuck with me in a weird way, and yeah, it's amazing. Kiwi. Is it kiwi?
We've all got it wrong all this time.
The whole time. Snake eggs and
the weird thing about Boosh is that I just came across. I was working at a video store and it came in. I don't know who ordered it or why, because nobody had watched it, and I watched it on repeat. Like if I closed, I would take it home with me every night that it wasn't
amazing,
and then take it back the next day. But I was watching it by myself, and it wasn't until I started watching your show that somebody had seen it and was like referencing it, and I was like, "What?" Which is probably part of the reason why I kept watching Full Force. But anyway,
that's the only reason. That's the only reason people stay. I'm just
waiting for more Mighty Boosh reference points.
Come for the Joe talk. Stay for the Boosh talk. That's it.
I can't wait for a modern interpretation of Shipwreck so that we can talk about future sailors.
Oh, future sailors. That one with the crimp off is just so good. Oh my god, I want to watch that now actually, because there's some bouncy, oh such a good time, bouncy.
Soup is my favorite of the songs.
Oh my god, and of Captain Cabinets is one of my favorite as well, because it's just so out of the blue. It's like it's like Captain Cabinets, trapped in cabinets. Will he get out? Will he get out? Of course he will. Captain Cabinets, trapped in. It's amazing. That's one of my favorites. Anyway,
and the Face magazine, there's so many jokes. God. The Face magazine it's so up to date that it's out of date by the time it's printed. That's the joke, and it's a ridiculous joke, but it's really quite clever. That everything is so consumable and so disposable. That like as soon as it's the new thing, it's over, it's past, it's done. Totally. So it's like, I mean, if anybody's watching this completely confused,
just check it out.
The Mighty Boosh is a British TV show, Mighty Boosh, and I think there's only like 3 seasons, so like you don't have to invest a lot of time.
This is the thing. You'll either be, yes, this is genius, or you guys are absolutely. What are you talking about? There's no sitting on the fence.
There's no in between. There's absolutely no in between.
There are some brilliant. It's just brilliant. Yeah. Anyway, that's enough of that.
That's enough of that. Classify. Should we talk about G.I. Joes a bit more? Or, I don't know.
Sure. I don't give. Keep talking, man. There's a question in there from Philly. Do you want me to answer that one?
Well, yes, but I've seen it, and we'll get there. I've started, so that we'll definitely come back to that.
Sorry,
we're definitely going to talk about that.
I've got my host hat on. Sorry.
That's why I sort of invited you back on. But okay, so going back to Full Force, right?
Yes.
Classified comes along. I don't think enough people have sort of really kind of talked about how it was a perfect storm of
crazy.
A nostalgic line coming out when everybody is at home going through dusty old boxes of their toys from their childhood, pulling out G.I. Joes and going, like, I think collecting kind of took off during the pandemic.
Yep.
GI Joe is one of those properties that, like you said, it's international. It's so ubiquitous and so sort of present in the common culture that when that line came out, you also had to think, like, another component I think of the perfect storm with Classified is that it was a new line. You didn't have to, you weren't jumping into the middle. It wasn't like, oh, I'm a collector and I got to backtrack and pay a late fee for everything. Oh, that came later, even though everything was brand new. But there was like this weird thing where everything worked, I think, in Classified's favor in terms of it was a brand that was underserviced at the time.
Yeah.
It couldn't have existed in a better time in terms of people just being in front of computer screens and kind of buying things just for the sake of collecting and buying.
There's a couple of funny, interesting things that I think need to be kind of talked about here. One of them is, obviously, I've been collecting for, since 1982, toys in general. And then obviously that little period between like 94 and say 2000, whatever it was, maybe late 90s again. No, it would have been 2002. So in that little kind of period of time, that's probably the only drop off, right? And then after that, it's kind of been fairly consistent. Now, there was obviously a new Sculpt era in that time that I missed out on. There was Extreme. There was Sigma 6. There's all sorts of different kind of like lives that this brand went through, right? Look at these chumps. Hey, how you doing, Jeremy? Or Commandos M.A.C.L.E.O.D Kimberlin. Again, you've changed your name yet with Squirrel Pet. That's brilliant.
He's kept the avatar, which is good because when people change both, I can't.
Just focus on Kimberlin and then you'll be fine at that point. Hello, Jeremy J. But yes, so basically there was this kind of period. It's never really been off the table, really. Do you know what I mean? Like the brand has ticked over, it's moved along, it's done different things, it's been reinvented. I've been fairly much within the community hardcore since about 2015. And that was when it was like getting in with Dave and doing the Full Force podcast. But then it was, honestly, it was doing conventions and seeing other collectors and meeting and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like I didn't see the spike as hard as a lot of new people into the kind of classified thing was, because we've gone through like Joe.
You were already on the inside.
Yeah, we were doing that whole convention circuit thing, like the Joe Cons and stuff like that, with like 15 figure box sets, 4-inch figures, and all of that kind of jazz, right? So we were kind of in it in a big way, invested in not just monetarily, but invested emotionally. And it's where I met my wife, for goodness sake. All that kind of stuff. So then when you get to like the classified thing, for me, it was just, oh, this is the new version of of the brand we've been involved in this entire time. But you're right, it brought on so many new people. And it's only really recently that I've been talking about this with a lot of the presenters and talking about the fact that, my God, there are like loads of people that had no real history with Joe, right? Yeah, there you go. Classified as the first G.I. Joe product billionaire ever bought, which is incredible. So like, but I'm not saying that, because this is the thing. I've never liked that whole thing of like gatekeeping, like that kind of thing of like, I've been involved in the brand for years. There were people going to Joe Cons before I started going to Joe Cons, and they don't, like Justin Bell, for example, and Pat and those guys, they've been going since Joe Cons started, the What's on Joe Mind crew, when it was like freaking number one, the first Joe Con kind of thing, way back in the day, like the 90s, late 90s. So they've been doing that for a long, long time. People like Justin Bell have been in the community online doing Dio stories since like the late 90s. So this huge community, his tank's been around for absolutely donkey's years. So, there's been, you come into this community or you come into this situation at some point. At some point, people jumped on 82 Joes, but there've been 60s 12-inch product for ages. So there's just because you come into it doesn't give you the right to be like, well, I've been in it longer, so classified doesn't, people that join on classified. No, you enjoy this brand however you want to enjoy it. What I'm saying is, from my perspective, I didn't see the spike as hard.
Yeah.
But obviously, it was an amazing event. It was something brand new, something that had been talked about in the community for years. 6-inch Joes had been a thing in the community's zeitgeist for a very long time. Customs had been made. I know, like Fred Axon, for example, good friends with Fred, a Boss Fight Studio sculptor and partner. He had made tons of 6-inch Joes before Classified had happened as customs. Amazing stuff as well. There's some really beauties he's got on display in his office. But that's by the by. But that people have been doing this stuff for a long period of time and wanting 6-inch figures. I didn't realize just how much people wanted 6-inch figures. I didn't realize just how much I wanted 6-inch figures until they appeared. And it was like, it opened something in me too. Whereas I'm like, damn, like this is like another level to me. This is like for me, it took the brand to another level. And just as a toy line, there was nothing else there was no other media to back it up at all. So like, it was literally just, here's toys, go nuts. And it really has. It's been incredibly successful and insanely like this kind of weird, I don't want to say ground zero. I hate using that term for obvious reasons, but like, I don't know, flashpoint. I've used it before.
I think that's a good
of just of the brand again, and just boom, like we're back up again, and we're seeing talk of movie crossovers with Transformers. Spoiler alert. We're seeing we're seeing talk of lots more things to come out of this brand that we wouldn't have done without Classified series. I think it's really. I look at the HasLabs. I mean, there's another barometer for how popular this brand is. Some people might say that could Hasbro be Hasbroing right now? Could they be doing a little bit too much in one small period of time, or are they just do they keep thinking that it's going to burst at some point? Because
get it all out while you can.
Nothing really lasts forever. Although Marvel Legends has had a good run and is still going. Star Wars Black Series is still technically going. It's not as bright as it shone as bright as it was, but it's still there. Masters of the Universe Classics had a great run, where they pretty much were scraping the bottom of the barrel eventually of characters that were in mini comics and things that were on a commercial.
New figures, tribute figures. Like I mean they were starting to get more creative with the releases. I think when I look at Classified and I see things like Kamakura or the Blue Ninjas,
they're not
or now I can't think of his Shadow Tracker.
Shadow Tracker, yeah. Who isn't out yet, but we've seen the
people. There's people that were sort of big G.I. Joe fans as kids that just don't know who that is because he was a modern figure.
Yeah.
And
that does always get me though, because I'm always like, oh, that's interesting you don't know that, and it gives you an idea of where that person has dropped in at the point of collecting, because I don't know every single thing about G.I. Joe. I know a lot. I've forgotten a lot more than a lot of people would know probably as well, but in that sense, I'll know roughly that something exists, or I'll have some sort of vague image of something, right? If someone drops some sort of foreign variant on me, I'll be able to locate it. I'll be able to work it out. I'll be able to know who it is. But for the most part, like, you go back into the 60s, I'm not going to know everything about the 12-inch line. I don't know everything about Palitoy. But when it comes to like, the kind of 82 onwards kind of 4-inch explosion, I'm going to know roughly what we're talking about in that era, and characters going on from there, from the Marvel comic, from the Sunbow cartoon, etc., etc. But people, like you say, have dropped in at later periods. They've come in at Sigma 6. They've come in at Extreme. They've come in at like the 25th only. They've come in at the 50th. They've come in at Classified. Loads of
Renegades.
people.
They could
Yeah,
have come in through media too, right? Like
exactly.
that's
Exactly. And they could be all sorts of different ages too. 100%, yeah. And it's just, to me, it's like I don't. It takes me by surprise sometimes, because I just think everyone knows about GI Joe, that when they collect it, I feel like if you're collecting GI Joe, I feel like it's one of those things where I used to get really excited about it and obsessed, and I'd want to know more about it and learn more about it and find out more stuff. So like, if someone isn't like that about it, it surprises me, because I'm
yeah.
my only experience. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know.
the perspective bias, where we kind of
Yeah,
assume that, like, oh, you're a GI Joe fan, you know, you must know about this. You must know who Sean Collins is. You're
yeah.
like, what? Who? What? Like, oh, you must know that Snake Eyes is a woman. And you're like, wait, what? Like, oh no, that's well. When Snake Eyes died, I mean, they're
I know what
like,
you mean.
wait, what? How could they do that?
Huh?
Like,
Yeah.
there's, I
I've gone through multiple deaths of Snake Eyes. So there was that one in the, I want to say it's Disavowed, isn't it? That run of comics. But I'm pretty sure he passed away in like that Image Devil's Due period.
I could have done. I mean, I'm not even that well versed in a
But he
lot
got,
of that middle
yeah,
section stuff
he
there.
got brought back to life by the Arashikage in some sort of mystical kind of
Yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah. I did.
So,
I mean, I knew about that. I just don't. The details are.
but that's the thing. Like, this history of this brand is mental. It's insane. And if you like, all you've got to do is watch one video of mine where I do one figure focus, and it lasts like 15 minutes, because I'm talking about, yeah, sorry, IKW. It was a long time ago. Come on.
12 years ago or something.
A long time ago. But yeah, like the if your video is big enough for one character, one like minuscule character that's got like 6-figure releases, but you've got a 15-minute video around them. Imagine that, like, to scale for all the characters. You know what I mean? Like, it is huge, and there's so much to kind of to soak in. I don't get the weird negative response to new things that people aren't aware of.
Yeah,
I've never
neither
understood.
do I. Neither do I.
Because, like, I put myself in my position as a kid. When a new figure or character came out, I was so excited. So I don't really know why that isn't taken through into kind of adult life.
How many waves of GI Joes in the 80s had new characters in them?
All of them.
All of them, right? Like, I mean, objectively speaking, the 1982 wave was entirely new characters. So I'm the same way, where it's sort of like, if it's a character that I don't know, I'm very curious to learn more. If it's Mole Rats, I'm like, that's really cool. That's a different original idea, and I'm here for it. I mean, you don't have to love everything.
No, you're right. You're right.
You know, but that doesn't mean that somebody else won't, right? Like, and that's where that's where there's a disconnect for me, is sort of like, you know, just because somebody loves this and you don't, doesn't really mean that there should be like some sort of,
or doesn't mean it shouldn't exist.
About.
Yeah. Like, I feel like it's more an empathy thing, that, isn't it? It's being able to kind of like empathize with for other people. But at the same time, like, I think, you know, yes, you can be like, oh, I'm still waiting for my Airtight figure. I'm still waiting for Alpine or whatever. Guys, that will
They're
come.
coming.
Like, trust me. Like, the amount of this is the thing. Who thought 3 years in we'd have all of these figures already? I didn't. I thought it was going to be a couple of figures every, you know, like, it was going to be like, what, 6-8 figures a year, 10 figures a year if you were lucky. Obviously, that increased, but like, now
how many people within the first year went out and bought fodder to do a spirit? You know what I mean? And then it was like, and as soon as Spirit came out, like right on the coattails, it felt like of you know, the the line being announced almost. But like that felt like the first one that everybody was doing a custom of Spirit, because everybody was there, right? Everybody was like, I need fodder because I'm gonna need, more troops. I'm gonna need this. I'm gonna need this line. Like you
Yeah.
said, we're gonna get 2 waves a year. It's a new thing. It's not, and we're like over 100 figures now, and it's to the point where like
I don't think anyone expected it. Honestly, I don't even think they did, because when they first revealed at Toy Fair, I was there. I was really I'm happy to have been involved in that and been at the preview event and watched it all unfold and meet Lenny and meet the team at the time, which has changed quite dramatically since, obviously. But like talking to them about it and everything, they were excited about it. Lenny was excited about it, but I could tell he was nervous about it. I could tell everyone was like hoping it would work. It would be a good thing. Snake Eyes, the G.I. Joe Origins, was in the kind of process of kind of on show and trailers and that kind of stuff as well. So there was this kind of like real like nervous energy of hoping this was a hit. And even though I noticed a comment that I think it was RKW made earlier about people not liking the first wave, or like there were a lot of complaints about it. I think despite that, it was super successful though. It was like, everyone wanted them and tried to get hold of them. And it was right smack bang in the middle of COVID as well, which threw all the spanners in the works. Like I could tell you, because I have a line plan from that year of what was coming out and when it was coming out. And we had everything lined up, and it was going to be like in, waves and make sense. And all of a sudden it was like, well, you're going to get Cobra Commander Snake Supreme, and you're going to get PDD Destro randomly here, and then you're going to get the Regal Cobra Commander over here, and then you're going to get Networks Cobra Commander. And it was just like this mess where it would have been normally. Well, funnily enough, I used a similar graphic when we did that we're looking at now in the background for the Network debacle on the Newsburst graphics, because it was a dumpster fire, man. Like it was an explosive dumpster fire.
There was that one, and then there was the what was the one with the little virtual world where your avatar walked around?
That was the Snake Eyes thing, wasn't it? That was I completely forgotten the name of it. Something World, though.
I'm convinced that none of that G.I. Joe product ever made it out.
No, because I was there for like the moment it went up, and but then it was all very much a lottery as well, wasn't it? It was all very fortunate for whoever won.
But for stuff like that, I always you can always go on eBay or sort of different spots and like find the stuff.
That was hard to get hold of.
Never surfaced. No. I don't think any of it ever went. Like, I don't think the product ever got made. But anyway, that's unrelated.
I wouldn't argue with that. I never saw the hat. It was a bucket hat, wasn't it? It was.
I wanted that bucket hat.
The slides. There was the kind of little kind of like
a T-shirt. The Snake Eyes kind of neon light looking T-shirt.
Do you know what my favorite bit of merchandise?
I feel bad for that artist, actually.
I do. My favorite bit of merchandise from. Do I have it nearby? Probably don't. I used to have it like right here. Or it might be hanging off my. It is. It's hanging off my light behind me. So I'm not going to turn it around. But anyway, it was a medallion. It was a Snake Eyes medallion for doing the virtual running club task. So you had
to only shipped to the US. I signed up for the thing. I started running for no reason other than to get that medallion. And then I logged in. I was going to log my miles or whatever. And they're like, oh, we don't ship to Canada. And I was like, well, then I'm never running again.
Where did I put it? Because it was one of those things that I really like, and I had it near me. I've probably put it in like a box or a crate or something.
It's the kind of thing that you're going to find in 5 years. And you're going to be like, oh, yeah.
That's the thing I was going to show.
I actually had to earn this one.
Yeah, so you did that. It was like 5K with weight, and 5K as fast as you can do it. 5K with weight, and then any sort of 5K, anything you wanted to do afterwards. And I remember doing that with Justin Bell and working out for it and everything. Because I used to run, and I used to be a semi-professional basketball player, so I was fit. And I used to run, and I used to love that. But then as soon as I kind of came here, it was kind of difficult, because I like running in nature, and I like running in on beach. Where mum and dad live, it's on the beach, like I said before. But their beach is phenomenal. It's like a private beach, basically. You go a little bit to the left, like a mile to the left, and it's hideous tourist kind of situation.
Right. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
walk about a mile down the beach and it is empty and it goes on for miles and it is beautiful. So that's what I wanted to, that's I love running on that kind of scenario. So without that, what do you call it? Motivation, it's difficult. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, did that, got the gear. There was loads of stuff. There was a t-shirt, there was all sorts of stuff. It was fun.
Yeah. There was the medallion if you completed everything, but you could
It's
sort of
so
order the
cool.
T-shirt, and you could
It's
get
huge.
like a number, like a pin-on number
Yeah, I
thing
got the
too
pin on number. Yeah,
for
yeah.
a virtual race, which I thought was odd. But I mean, for people that
It's
do a lot of races, they collect those, right? So,
yeah. It makes sense for that.
um,
Anyway, yeah, that was fun though.
we
Anyway,
are at
classified. Holy
yeah.
crap! Yeah, let's
Well,
keep going.
we're at 2 hours, so I think
Keep going.
we'll do a couple more classified related questions here, and we'll try to wrap it up.
Forget that. Just keep it going, man.
The
24-hour.
So we've both said, I mean, we kind of, we're both shocked and amazed that we've gotten as many figures as we have.
Amazing.
I got my chuckles, which was my kind of like, I hope we get this one.
Yeah.
We haven't got Lightfoot yet, but as we said, I think we're gonna get it. I mean, it's just a matter of time.
I think,
And I feel
lot.
very strongly about that too because of some news that we've had recently, but we'll get to that as well. Well, what is classified not done yet that you would like to see?
No, I'll just put that on there. What has classified done yet that I have? Oh, that's a good question, and I think.
Or are you like me, where you're just sort of like, I think they're just going to do everything. It's just hurry up.
I know they are. That's
and
the
wait.
thing. You know they're going to keep doing this. It's got legs for sure. You've got another. I would say you've probably got another minimum 2 HasLabs left before that kind of thing maybe stops having as much momentum. I don't know. I could be wrong, but that's
they do their HasLabs so well. Like the G.I. Joe team.
Yeah, they do them well.
Is absolutely killing it with what they do.
Sorry, I can't just pass bumping. I got 5 on it by the Loonies. Sorry, carry on.
I mean, you look at the other brand teams that are probably just like looking at the G.I. Joe guys, like, how are they doing this? Like, what is going on here?
There's a lot that goes into this. One, I think they have an absolutely superb marketer in Emily, who not only is great at that job, but she does stuff for the brand that we will never be privy to, but she fights for it. Like, she literally fights for, getting all of that gear for Tripwire. She fights for, the things to be like done properly and done right and all that kind of stuff. I genuinely cannot explain to you in detail because I can't, but I can tell you she does stuff that you will never be aware of, but she is an absolute advocate for this brand, right? One, that's the first thing. Having someone fighting your corner in a corporate environment is huge. With Lenny, you've got an amazing designer who is passionate, he is knowledgeable, and he's willing to learn more about the brand that he might not know a lot about as well.
Yeah.
So his strength is kind of like building on those weaknesses. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so, and plus he's a really talented designer. So you've got that. And then you've got the rest of the team who are just brilliant at what they do. So you've got this like excellent brand team on it. And that's why that's the case. Yes, Philly Jones, let's answer this question, shall we?
Okay, riddle me this, Chris. What's your connection with the Hasbro team? Do you work with them? Because you always have the T, aka Intel, inquiring minds want to know. I have an insight into this. But I know that you don't work for Hasbro. You're just good friends with them.
Yeah. So this is the thing, right? I have worked quite tirelessly to cultivate a really good working relationship, if that makes sense, from what is this podcast, the Full Force podcast, not your podcast, mate, but the Full Force podcast, and what they're doing with the G.I. Joe brand. So I've just worked with them, like not for them, but like, doing kind of these interviews and stuff like that. And, basically making those connections. And just basically, you know, over the years, putting a lot of work in to cultivate that relationship with these people. Now, in terms of the information and the intel, it doesn't necessarily come from Hasbro, because that wouldn't be allowed, would it? If you think about it, you know, like I'm not getting information direct. Well, if I get information directly from Hasbro, it's information I'm allowed to disperse with the
It's the
rest of.
media release stuff.
Yeah, it's media release stuff, or it's stuff where I've asked a question to, like, Emily or Lenny, and they've said, "Oh, this is what that is about," and then I can go back and I can say to everyone, "Yeah, I can confirm this." Do you know what I mean? So it's not like they're telling me like stuff that's NDA and I can't really kind of talk about it. So I have a relationship with them where they can kind of treat me as a member of the press, basically. They can use me in that sense, but not that it really is. They don't need to use me. They can use actual press
Actual
for that.
news outlets.
Actual news outlets. I'm very small scale in this, but I am friends with them at the same time. I'm friends with Emily and Lenny and Tony and all sorts. Who else? Mark. Who else is there? B.M.A.C.L.O.E.D on the Transformers team. I'm friends with lots of people at Hasbro. It really just helps to get, like, you know, close enough to kind of set things up like interviews. Now, in terms of the intel I receive, I have probably 10, maybe more sources of information that range from all sorts of different aspects. Some stuff I can talk about, some stuff I don't talk about because I'm not allowed to, and some stuff I, you know, kind of gets out on the Patreon because there's like a bit of a grey area about it.
Yeah.
So they're the levels basically that I'm working with. There's a balance, but no, I don't work for Hasbro. I just, in a lot of cases, have worked with them on certain things, but not like in a professional capacity, should we say, not in like an actual employee capacity.
This just popped up. The metal spiked helmet. That's Big Boa, right? It's got to be Big Boa.
So I can probably say this. It's not Big Boa.
Okay.
Right? But I think I can confirm.
I haven't looked that closely at it, but
I think I can confirm that it is for classified. So I know that, because obviously sometimes when we see these kind of things come out and it's like random heads and then this random thing we don't know what it is, usually it's like a Fortnite thing, or it's a Marvel Legends thing, or it's something else that might have got mixed in, you know, with whatever factory is working, you know, whatever. Those things can happen and people can get confused and not know what it is.
Sure. Yeah.
In fact, a lot of the time when those things go up, it's just, here's a lot, and they don't even, like, there's no other information because they don't bloody know. Half the time the people,
and they don't care, they just want to sell it if it's on eBay,
they
right?
know it's hot. So yeah, I think it's I know for a fact, or I can probably confirm that it's not Big Boa, but it is classified related. Do I know what it is? Not a sausage, not an effing sausage, unfortunately, guys. But Neil, right, this is the thing, right? I will tell you. You say I'm terrible at hiding when I know, but I will tell you if I do know. That's the thing. Like, I'll tell you if I know. I do not know what that helmet is for. Don't worry. I have asked the question to everyone I know that might know that answer, and I have not got the answer yet. I would tell you if I knew what it was, but I know for a fact it's not Big Boa because that was one of the questions I posed. And if, in factual fact, there's another image that's come out. Darren put it in the comments of that post. So if you go to that comments of that post, I'll probably share it again at some point. I've been very slack this week. Sorry, guys. But the helmet you can see is like, it's got much longer and it looks like a helmet, like a Centurion kind of thing. So I don't know who it's for, but it could be something new. I just don't know yet. I'm trying to work it out though. Trust me, trying to.
Now you don't work for Hasbro, and you're not a big major news outlet.
Nope.
But I think, and I share the sentiment that
highly respected
Luke has put in here. For me, the Full Force channel is as much an integral part of the G.I. Joe fandom experience as collecting toys, comics, books, etc. Without you, it would just not be the same. Therefore, congratulations on this well-deserved tribute, Mr. McLeod, and he spells it out as they have with the actual figure. Now, when that came out, you didn't know that was you knew Tripwire was coming out. You did not know that they had a
I knew
mine
Tripwire was coming.
detecting
Here's
robot.
well, actually, well, let me be
Oh,
full
you
disclosure here.
did know that actually.
Full disclosure. I knew Tripwire was coming out. I knew it was a deluxe, and there was a hint that we thought there might be a bomb disposal robot because of the price point, because
The
of the
deluxe.
deluxe.
Yeah.
What's Tripwire going to come with, etc., etc. So that was kind of expected. What wasn't expected was the name. Now, I know I spell my name slightly differently. It's M.C.L.E.O.D, but the clan, the original clan MacLeod, is M.A.C.L.E.O.D, right? And we dropped the A at some point. My dad has even talked, we've talked about it in the past about bringing the A back into our name and having it changed and all that kind of stuff. Because effectively,
and now you're on board for that.
Oh, 100% on board for it. But no, like, if you think about it, like back in the day, it was all about like this. A lot of this information came about in the censuses and stuff like. Here's some real nerdy knowledge for you. And a lot of people couldn't read or write, very well, and a lot of them didn't even know how to spell their name. So they would just say it, and then whoever was writing it for them would write it however they thought it was spelled. They didn't spell it out. They didn't know. So technically, my name is M.A.C.L.E.O.D. if you go back far enough.
Right.
But it's obviously like that A was dropped at some point in our family history because of the census that was filled out a different way. There's a lot of M.C.L.E.O.D.s. There's a lot of M.C.C.L.E.O.D.s. There's a lot of M.A.C.C.L.O.U.D.s. It's all from the same name, which is quite interesting, isn't it? So if you're a MacLeod, even if you've got like a cloud spelling, C-L-U-O-U-D, you're still Clan MacLeod, which is M.A.C.L.E.O.D, which is interesting. Anyway, enough of that. Do you know? Also, it means son of Leod. Mac means son of. Leod means is the origin.
Is the ye old lord from
Viking, in actual fact. They came down from Scandinavia and they kind of infiltrated the Isle of Skye in Scotland and did a lot of damage, and then had their own. And
as a result, they're mine detecting robots.
Although when I told my folks about, so let me get you a few details here. So when this was revealed on the show, on the live panel, they said the name came up, right, and my ears pricked up, but I didn't quite register. And then Paddy was messaging crazy, like, "Oh my god, I think they've called it MacLeod," and I'm like, "Nah." Like, no, I don't think that's the case. And then when we looked at the, all of the information and everything, M.A.C.L.E.O.D, I'm like, what the hell? And so I messaged Lenny immediately. He can't say anything, right? He can't, because this is one of those things where they're not allowed to necessarily, it's one of those things where it's like no known affiliated name is associated with, it's that kind of situation, right? But it was a nod. It was an homage, and they can say that. And Lenny kind of basically said to me, I sent him the message saying, is it called MacLeod? And he sent back like a winking emoji and said, like, love you, bud, kind of thing. So I'm like, oh my God. So that's when it dawned on me during the live stream I was doing and caught me off guard, I will have to say, speaking about crying earlier on. And I was like, I literally had a lump in my throat. I was like, oh my God, that was like a nod. It was an homage. And that has been backed up as well by other people at the company to say that it was a nod. So it's not like there's a reworking of the spelling a little bit and that kind of thing. So there's an element there where it's like it also helps that my name has EOD in it for explosive ordnance disposal.
There you go. So it just happened to work out in everybody's best interest there.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
Well, I mean, I genuinely I think it's well deserved, and I'll be honest, like I said, you talked about when you guys first started way back when you did doing the audio stuff. There wasn't a whole lot of people doing it. Now everybody is doing it.
Oh, it's huge, yeah.
And the market is so oversaturated with G.I. Joe podcasts and YouTube channels and everything, right? Blogs and everything. and it's I still, you know, yours is still my favorite, which is easy for me to say when you're on on screen here with me. But you know, I say it because it's true, and
I
like I
appreciate
said,
that.
you know, when I kind of got back into GI Joes and sort of came across your channel, just completely by accident, really. I mean, I was just on YouTube looking for GI Joe content. Yours was the one that I came back to, and it's because of the innuendo, it's because of the positivity, it's because of all the things that I told you, you know, privately that I appreciate in terms of what you do. But it's, I mean, I say it publicly as well.
You're trying to
You
make me
know,
cry now, aren't you? Right now, at this moment.
I wonder, could we actually push it that hard? No, I'm not. No, I just, you know, I think in the current landscape, from my perspective, in the current landscape, I don't think there's anybody that's probably more deserving
I
of
appreciate that.
such an honor
I appreciate that very
than
much.
you.
Thank you. Thank you very
So,
much. I appreciate all
um,
the nice comments as well. I do appreciate all that as well, guys. Like at the same time, like I feel like, you know, I'm not going to lie, it's amazing. It's an amazing feeling to like have that. And when I showed mom and dad the other day, we like, when it happened, like the next day, we Zoom called them or FaceTime them, and I was like, oh, by the way, Hasbro have named this McLeod, and dad, like mom and dad were like, what? That is nuts. Like, yeah, we had a good conversation about that. So yeah, and like obviously they're kind of also to blame for me being in this GI Joe obsession,
sure,
because
yeah, yeah.
they're the ones that have, you know, enabled it for
They
however many
enabled it for
years.
all those
Yeah,
years, yeah.
they still are. So, you know, massive love to my folks, and of course to the whole fam in the US and the UK. Like, yeah, I'm going to be going back there very soon. Really got to sort that out. And then yeah, we'll be doing some fun. We'll do some fun content from the UK for a change. Yeah, we'll do that.
You could find the Palatoy burial site, right? Isn't it still like unearthed, the myth of
Yes,
the
Brian,
toy dump?
Brian and Paddy covered that, I think, in the couple of the Total Action Force books. We actually talked about this with Bob as well, and he gave us loads of cool. Yeah, they are yeah, true, Tristan, true. Bob gave us some interesting insights. So he knows exactly where they would have, you know, they have
Where
buried
it would have happened if
stuff.
it, yeah.
But I think it's been ransacked, honestly, already. I think it's already been. Plus, also, I think it's in like it's right near the site where the factory used to be. So, but I think it's a little bit like tight security wise. So you'd have to do it on the sly, or you'd have to do it with permission. So yeah, but that'd be fun.
That would be cool. You could do it like the history shows where like they go after like treasure and stuff.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
like hunters, treasure hunters. Yeah.
David Bax asked, what are your favorite 5 figures, Adam and Chris? We're gonna save that one because we already talked about doing a video.
We'll do that. Yeah.
We talked about doing a video of what our favorite classified figures are sort of up to this point. And we said we'd do it when it hit 100 figures. We already hit 100 figures because we didn't realize they were going to release 30 things in June and July. It's just bonkers. It's crazy to think that, like, you know, we're 100 in. But there's still
more.
You know, more in the pipeline. There's more things that have been named but don't have numbers yet. Yeah. There's reveals that don't have numbers yet. You know, that Helix Hawk Wave doesn't have numbers yet.
Yeah.
And then that's just stuff that we know about. And then there's, you know, all the stuff, you know, all this stuff that we thought was 2024 that's now 2023. Like next year, we're gonna get another 20 or 30 or 60.
Yeah. It's not it's not slowing down.
No.
Plus, I mean, the fact that they're incorporating retail vehicles now, you know, that is not the sign of a line that is slowing up. That's the sign of a line that is ramping up. So yeah, I think we're gonna get a lot more cool stuff. I know we're gonna get a lot more cool stuff. I think the stuff that's in kind of development now, there's also obviously stuff in development for 2025. We're not even in 2024 yet, are we? What year are we in?
2023.
Yeah, okay.
We're still, believe it or not,
even in 2024 yet, and there's already development going on for 2025. That I'm not. I'm not going to say anything, but there might be a little bit more official connectivity with the Full Force podcast in the future. But yeah, 2025, more development coming. So my goodness, like it's just nonstop. It's nonstop, and I think we've at least got minimum 2 more years left of this. 2 more minimum.
I mean, they've got 2 more years of developed stuff, right? Like you're saying, like 24.
I mean, well along.
24 and 25. So like I don't think that they would plan for further out than that, because you just can't know what's going to happen in the meantime.
It's about you're doing about 2 years, aren't you? A year and a half is what you usually kind of aiming for, and they've minimized that development process quite dramatically over the years with technology, with the way that the processes work now. It's now, I think it's closer to more like 8 or 9 months from development to kind of like some sort of production sample.
To an actual figure form. Yeah.
That has really kind of minimized. It used to be 2 years, then it was about a year and a half for a long period of time. Now you're looking at like, well inside a year that can get done. So yeah, if you're developing to 2025 or develop from now in looking at 2025, then there's a lot of, you're looking quite far into the future. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Now, as far as the future goes, I should probably do some other stuff. My wife keeps texting me. So we should probably wrap it up. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Same.
We'll get you on again. Hello to Kate and Phoebe. I'm sure they're right there. I know, Kate, I know that you try to keep quiet while we do these videos, and I appreciate that, but I don't worry about it.
Yeah, just go nuts. Yeah,
go nuts. It's I appreciate her as much for letting you have the time to do these, because 100%. I know that there's probably better things that we could be doing with our time
100%,
talking
300%.
About toys.
I think, like I said, going forward, this will be a situation where there'll be more content coming, because it's definitely one of those things where there needs to be a bit of separation, and at the moment I can't really do that, and it's not fair. So like in this scenario, like I can do this with you for a couple of hours, and then but at the same time, it's affecting other people. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the problem.
Well, everybody that's been hanging out, thank you for hanging out. It's always a pleasure to have the chat going, because that's what it's about. I mean, that was my ambition with the channel, was just to have cool conversations with cool people about cool stuff.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. You're never coming back.
You had a conversation with a person about some cool stuff, I would say. But yeah.
For 2.5 hours. Yeah, it was so bad that we only talked for 2.5 hours. Did I say at the top we were going to go for an hour?
I can't remember. It was hours ago. I thank you so much for having me on, mate. I really appreciate it. I love the show. I love talking to you, and it's great chatting with everyone. Again, all the familiar faces in the chat.
I was going to say, there's a lot of familiar faces.
Neil,
for sure,
Jeremy, and RKW, and Tristan, and everyone. It's crazy to see everyone in here. Philly, David Bax, as you said. There's more. I'm going to say all of them. I think that is everyone that I mentioned. If I haven't mentioned you, Bill was another one, billionaire. I said
billionaire. Tristan was here. Larry Reed was here.
Yeah.
The list goes on and on and on.
Luke Poulon as well. Allison,
absolutely. Fellow Canadian.
Thanks for everyone.
We talk about the market being so saturated with this stuff. You could be watching any video, and you're here watching this one probably because of Chris. But I appreciate it nonetheless. And we're definitely going to have you back on. So that's
can't wait.
Let's leave it at that.
Let's do it.
No, I always I'm not even going to it. Yeah, it's like the outro thing, the music, whatever. I don't care. Thanks, guys. Until next time. Bye-bye.